I'd like to call the April 22nd, 2020 Select Board meeting to order. Thank you folks for joining us this evening at our weekly meeting. Sorry, I'm just attempting to change slides and it's giving me a hard time in the background. There we go. Tonight we're being broadcast on Verizon Channel 33, Xfinity Channel 22, as well as Facebook Live. Please note that if you would like to offer public comment for our meeting, please send it by email to selectboard@ci.reading.ma.us. First of all, I want to once again recognize the Herculean efforts being made by first responders, command staff, town employees, and volunteers, all of whom are working very hard to keep us safe. As chair of the Select Board, I've been joining a weekly command call, and I'm very impressed with how the team is working together, addressing key issues and community concerns, setting and achieving goals for the response plan, and being laser focused on how to take care of the community at large and those facing critical issues. Sorry, my slides are moving slowly tonight for some reason. Oops, there we go. Please do reach out to the town if you have any questions or concerns or are finding yourself in a difficult position. Here are the key contact names, emails, and phone numbers. Thanks also to all of the neighbors helping neighbors, keeping an eye out for those most vulnerable in our community. I also want to thank wholeheartedly all the healthcare workers and all essential employees working at grocery stores, pharmacies, and other businesses that are dedicating themselves to keep us safe, cared for, and with food and other needs. We owe you all a big debt of gratitude. Just a couple more items before moving to the agenda. I want to remind all town meeting members and residents that annual town meeting will not be taking place next week. It has been postponed. A letter to that effect, which should be on the screen now, will be going out from the town moderator explaining essentially the vote that the Select Board took at our last meeting, postponing town meeting until June 15th. And also that we'll have an update at our last meeting in May to assure kind of how things are going to take place. Second item, for our meeting next week on Wednesday, April 29th at 7 p.m., our three state legislators, Senator Jason Lewis, Representatives Brad Jones, and Rich Haggerty, have offered to join us at the start of our meeting right after the COVID-19 updates. They'll share a few words with us, and if you have questions that you would like them to address, and this is for board members and members of the public, please send them to our Select Board email address, selectboard@ci.reading.ma.us in advance so that they can cover many of the topics that are of interest to you. For tonight's meeting, our agenda will start with the COVID-19 response from Eleanor Shonkoff from the Board of Health. And then Bob LaSure and Kevin Bowmiller will talk a little bit about, Kevin about Elder and Human Services, Bob the town response on COVID-19. I think we'll then take questions from the board as well as the public related to COVID-19 issues. After that, we'll move to an update on town activities. I know Town Manager Bob LaSure and Assistant Town Manager Gene Delios would like to address a couple of issues specifically there. Then we'll move on to liaison reports. I know that we have at least one from the RMLD meeting that took place last night. We'll then allow for a period of public comment in the form of reading emails that were sent to the board. Consistent with our policy at town hall-based meetings, I ask that you send us emails that are not political or derogatory, are brief in duration. At town hall, we ask the time be limited to 2 minutes maximum per comment, and relate to the subject matter that the board has purview over. Later this evening, we're going to have a discussion about public comment and how we can improve how we accept and work with it at our meetings. After that, we'll discuss and vote on liaison assignments for board members. We'll then discuss and vote on extending the Human Rights Ad Hoc Committee from June 2020 to December of 2020. Then, sorry, I've got some typos here. We'll then discuss and vote on extending, sorry, I did that one. Next is to appoint 2 members to the Volunteer Appointment Subcommittee. At approximately 8:15, we'll discuss volunteer boards and committees, vacancies that exist, and ask for the public to please take on some of these roles. Then we're going to talk about public comment, how we can improve it. At about 9 o'clock, we'll talk about the board's communications policies, and then last on the agenda will be discussion of future meeting topics. So with that, let me turn it over to Eleanor Shankoff from the Board of Health to provide an update. And please take it away, Eleanor.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark. I wanted to say that I just appreciate the opportunity for the select board to participate. For the Board of Health to participate in these meetings with the select board. I think it's a nice way to stay in contact with you all, as well as with the public. And I've also appreciated how you all have joined the command meetings, and for the others who are command right now, they have been joining our meetings on Monday, so once a week, and we have all been collaborating frequently, and I think that's been very beneficial. And to people watching, I just wanted to say I think they're kind of keep up the good work. I think people have been practicing social distancing, encouraging, again, the hand washing behavior. And if you, Mark, as you said, see things in the community, please reach out and let us know. If you have concerns, let us know. If you see great things, if you see two people taking a walk on opposite sides of the street, you can encourage that as well. So I wanted to start by following up on a couple of comments from our chair, Emmy Dove, last meeting. She talked about some staffing needs, and there were some questions around that. We currently seem to be handling the caseload well. Our health nurse, Laura Vlasic, is in contact with the nurses about 2 to 3 times per day and continues to ask how they're being able to handle and manage things. There is, we do not have, yeah, so I guess I'll just stop there. I have a few more comments about that that I'll talk about in a minute, which is a program from the Mass Department of Public Health that some people might have questions about. So that was the one thing, the handling of the caseload. The second is PPE needs and resources. There were some questions about that. And within the last week, Chief Burns at the fire department was able to give out PPE both to the police department, and he went around and visited elder care facilities, giving out any PPE that was needed there. Most places, well, not all places, felt that they needed the PPE, so he was able to give it out when it was needed, but other facilities felt that they were covered. They had people who were already, for example, they had their own masks already. So those supplies were able to go out to the elder care facilities that expressed a need.
Excuse me for 1 second, Eleanor, just for everybody so that they know, PPE is personal protective equipment.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. So for the most part here, we're talking about masks, so face coverings.
Thank you.
And then a final question last time was about assistance requests from community members. So whether or not there has been an increase, for example, in people contacting elder services with needs. And we talked about last time that Jean Delios and collaborated with Chief Jackson to make available food bags with also some supplies like toilet paper. And that now a volunteer system is in place to disperse those bags to those who need them. So that's following up on last week. And then I wanted to give some updates from our meetings after 4/14. So we've met 3 times since the 14th. I have some good news to report in terms of how our Department of Health has been on top of tracing this pandemic. Our tracking numbers were only 3 off from the state numbers. And actually that's a very, very good thing. It indicates that we have been able to access Maven. This was touched on briefly in a previous meeting. Maven is the centralized electronic system that is incredibly complicated, and nurses log in to see positive cases that have come up. And we were very similar to what the state's numbers were. Just to give a reference point, we were in the minority that most towns were off by a lot more, in some cases by 100 off. And we think that our being 3 off was related to the time at which we download the information. So we download the information multiple times throughout the day. The last time is usually between like 7 and 9 p.m. So I will go ahead and give you those numbers. As of April 21st, so last night at 8:25 p.m., we had confirmed positives were 132 cases. So of those, 93 are currently still active, 32 have recovered, and 7 people have passed away. So the anticipated predicted peak from some data sets, this is the COVID-19healthdata.org that I believe the governor is using, had predicted a peak on April 19th. We are in Reading currently seeing an increase. So it does not appear yet that we have passed that peak. There have been some other predictions of April 28th, so that has yet to be determined. What I was mentioning before about resources for contact tracing is that the Massachusetts Department of Public Health has collaborated with Partners in Health, which is a nonprofit, to provide a lot more resources for contact tracing to towns. The last update that we heard, I think this was on the 15th or the 17th, was that this is an opt-in program. And what they do is they will make any contact tracing calls that you need to be made that you are unable to make during the course of that day. We are not currently opting in to this program. The rationale is twofold. One is that currently, given the staff that we have, I believe that's 11 nurses, but Jean may have an updated number there, but I think we have 9 public health nurses, school nurses, and then the public health nurses. So given the staffing that we have in collaboration with the school, we have been able to make all those contact tracing calls, and we're not at the end of the day getting to the list and saying, oh, we still have more calls to make. So we're currently managing that caseload. If it gets to a point where we are no longer able to make those calls within the day, then we can opt in to this system. But given that the system was just launched, I think a couple of days ago, we were going to wait and see whether or not any changes happen with the system, and whether or not we are actually needing it. Because if you opt in, then automatically at 6 p.m., any cases that you haven't called go to the state and they no longer become your cases. So you lose control over those cases. So currently we're not opting in, but we can if a need arises. So a couple of updates on policies that we have discussed and are moving forward with. The first is face covering. So we've gotten at least one complaint from a resident that saw someone who was working in an essential business, an employee who wasn't wearing a face protective covering, and the CDC is now recommending face covering. So not, the N95 masks and not even surgical masks, but just something like a bandana or a handkerchief or a homemade mask out of fabric material. And at our meeting yesterday, we passed a motion requiring the to adopt some modified language from the Peabody order that just went out, that I think was released a few days ago. So in Peabody, they are essentially, the order is to require that citizens who are going out in public and can't maintain that 6-foot distance from someone else do wear a face covering, and that employees also wear face coverings. And if people are entering buildings that have more than one person, so for example, if you're entering a high density living building, that you would also need to be wearing a mask. So we are all in agreement about ordering the face coverings, but we are going to finalize the language on our meeting this Friday. For the construction site policy, so that was the second one I think that you all had talked about last week and were familiar that there's some upcoming guidance there. We did adopt language for ordering the construction site policies and procedures. The guidance is in line with the state, but provides some more detail around things like hand washing, maintaining social distance, except in the case where personal injury may result. And we added some language about face masks. So the implementation plan for this is that fire and building have generously offered to help manage these inspections. So they'll go in and do the initial inspection using a checklist, and then they'll report to the health agent weekly reports of hazard and analysis and compliance plan, and then the health agent will do any enforcement that's necessary. So those are two separate things. So one is the health agent will be notified in the event of any non-compliance issue, will be identified immediately, but then the health agent will also receive weekly reports to ensure that construction sites are still meeting the requirements. And then I just have a couple more updates for the general public. And I think there might be an email about this too, but regarding gloves or any personal protective equipment that is disposed of in a way that residents perceive that is potentially biohazard waste being left, for example, in parking lots. We got calls about gloves being in parking lots. We have been in collaboration with Jane Wellman and Phil at RCTV, who are willing to help us create content and push it out through things like the town website. Last week, I think Emmy mentioned that we're trying to do something of a series, new relevant content that maybe comes out weekly, although we don't have a schedule set for that. And Board of Health member Kevin Sexton has created a press release about gloves and their uses, making sure that people don't have a false sense of security from the gloves, and that germs could still be on the gloves, and if you transmit them, you could still transmit while wearing the gloves, as well as proper disposal information there. Regarding gloves in the parking lot, our health agent, the day that we got that call, the day that the Board of Health discussed it, went out and talked to the larger grocery stores, looked at what bins were available for disposal of PPE. They took the covers off the bins so that people could more easily throw them in without actually touching and opening a cover. And we advised that the grocery stores get more bins so that people would have easier access to them, such as putting them right by the carriage return. And our reports indicate that stores have been compliant with that. And finally, we have received some calls from non-essential businesses that want to reopen, just wanting to find out information. So we posted the Mass Department of Public Health COVID-19 Essential Services FAQs for those who have questions about that. Moving forward, I mentioned the language for the facial coverings. We intend to approve that final language on Friday and go ahead and release that. And also to develop, to continue to ensure systematic monitoring of all the actions and plans and motions that we've put in place, and consider enforcement policies such as fines for the future. So those are all of my updates.
Awesome. Could I ask one clarifying question? When you meet on Friday to talk about face coverings, will that include for restaurant workers also? Would they be included in that?
Yes. So any non-essential business workers would be included, but it's also for community members. So anyone who's going out in public, if you're entering a restaurant, if you're working in a restaurant. Also, it would require the restaurants to post, the essential businesses to post a sign that we are going to provide about maintaining social distance and wearing the masks while in that building.
Great. Thank you. Board members have any questions for Eleanor? No. Oh, go ahead, Karen. Sorry.
Hi. Thank you for the update. So what I heard you say is that we're going to have a facial covering policy coming. So I have been making some masks, and but I'm not sure that everyone in our community has the ability to do that, or as a mom will sew them and drop them off. So have we been able to get any masks in the town that we could make available through a health agent or the senior center or by some other means? So can a resident or a business call in and ask for help?
We have discussed a couple of possibilities there. One was creating sort of a drop box. I think other towns have created that, where people can donate the masks, and then we would have a 24-hour or longer wait policy before people could pick them up. But I think the larger supply would come from, we also discussed whether or not to order PPE equipment through the health agent has found a contact who is able to order larger quantities, We have not yet ordered those larger quantities. In communication with Chief Burns, for now, it seems that the supply is adequate. For community members, we're taking an approach of volunteer coordination, and this is still in discussion, and maybe Jean and Bob have more to weigh in here about a concerted effort to coordinate any volunteer activity to help provide those masks. But to my knowledge, currently we don't have plans to purchase masks for individual residents. But Bob and Jean, do you have any updates?
I can give an update on that. The town has actually ordered a significant amount of masks. Reluctant to say how many because the supply chain is so difficult right now. We ordered them a while ago. The first 10,000 should have come in already and has not. So we're just not sure what the time frame is. We have every intention, should the supply chain hold up and our order be filled, of offering some sort of day down at the high school for senior and medically fragile residents to pick up masks. We just can't say when that will be because, again, we don't have the masks on hand. If that's going to take longer than next week, then we may have to find a plan B for that because we really expected to have those masks in this week, but as yet have not.
Would it be possible to approach Laura Vlasik's contact about additional masks?
I think that's the contact we actually use.
Oh, okay. And it might be worth it for broader than simply the elderly and medically fragile individuals. And correct me if I am misunderstanding this, Eleanor. A lot of the purpose of wearing masks is to prevent transmission from the person actually wearing the masks. So even if you're not medically fragile, it's a good idea to wear them to prevent transmitting if you're asymptomatic.
Great, that's a good point. Yes, thank you.
It is a good idea, but we won't have the quantity for that, Ann. Wakefield gave away 10,000 in a few hours last week, and they just picked a certain age and older and medically fragile. So I don't think we're going to have 40,000 to give out to residents. Or if you give out 3 per resident, in theory, that's 80,000 in Reading. We will never have any kind of a number like that to be able to afford. Should masks become more available, we can certainly consider that, though. We wanted to deal with the most at-risk population first.
That makes sense.
So the policy as drafted by the Board of Health does allow for flexibility for facial coverings. And so scarves, bandanas, you see a lot of people using some sort of fabric to cover their face that is really in keeping with the policy. So there is a built-in flexibility there. And a lot of people, I think, are going that route as opposed to masks.
Any other questions for Eleanor directly? Oh, Vanessa, go ahead first. Sorry.
Actually, my question's for Bob, but Bob, I know I asked this last week, but it might be a recurring one, which is, do we continue to have enough supplies, masks, gloves for police, fire, DPW, anyone who's potentially interacting with the public?
Right now, yes, we do.
Great, thank you.
Aaron, you had your hand up as well.
Thank you. I think this is a question for Eleanor. So we got an update from Chief Burns about him going to the high density complexes in town, whether senior or other vulnerable, medically vulnerable individuals. And so that was the question that came out of that conversation was, I know we want people to know that they need to be extra careful without giving out anyone's identity. If you're living in a high density complex, if your close relative or a loved one was living in a high density complex and you knew there was an outbreak, you would want to know. So what we're seeing is differing responses to different complexes in our communities. So if if we're in a complex that doesn't go ahead, that has a positive contact and doesn't go ahead and notify the residents because they're not sure it's necessary, or by a public notice of some sort, and doesn't order tests or doesn't have the ability to order tests or anything like that, does the health agent have the ability to ask them or order them to make at least a general public notification that there have been one or more positive cases, so that the neighbors and the communities in that high density complex understand, how close this really is to them?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great issue for raising. So we did pass an order that the high density living facilities do make it known. They are now required to post if someone in the building has tested positive for COVID-19. So they are required, they are not at liberty to disclose that person's name or, for example, what floor they live on, but just a notice to make it public. With the post, we gave some guidance about what they would want to post, but they are ordered to make that information available.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Maybe it's worth reiterating also, just one sec, Carlo, on at the command meeting, there was a discussion about how frequently the high density facilities are being visited. And I believe that Chief Burns said they're getting in there at least twice a week to visit, to offer equipment, to see if they need any assistance. Did I hear that correctly, Bob?
Correct. At least twice.
At least twice.
And the visit is a disguised inspection. Oops.
Sorry, Carlo, please go ahead.
I just had a question for Eleanor. Thank you for pushing this forward for the face coverings. When you set your policy on Friday, will it be enacted that day, or will be there some lag time to do a PSA for the following week?
That's a good question. Originally, this is sort of a technicality. Originally, we approved it on Monday to go into effect 2 days later. We then decided to change the language to make it more tailored to Reading. So my anticipation is that on Friday, when we have this discussion, we will probably similarly give at least 1 day, probably 2 days lag time, in order to push it out through all the communication channels that we have been using, RCTV, the Facebook, the Town of Reading Facebook site.
And will there be signs made for the businesses or guidance on the language, or is that up to them?
Nope, we're attaching a sign. So they would need to print it out, but then post it. So they don't have to come up with it. It's standard for everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Does the board have any other questions? Eleanor, can we ask that you hang for a little bit longer? I think it'd be good. Bob and Kevin, I know, would like to do some updates, and then I think we'd like to open it also to see if the public has any questions, COVID-19 related first.
Yes.
Great, thanks. Bob, do you want to go first, or you want Kevin? What's your preference?
Yeah, I will, Mark. Thank you. I'm just going to briefly go over very quickly 9 goals that Command is currently working on. I'll say a few words about each and then turn it over to Kevin. Goal 1 is Kevin's. That's determine residents that need assistance. My only addition to that is tomorrow I'm having a conference call with a nationally well-known charitable organization with the goal to set up a Reading fund. So I know that there are businesses in town and some residents in town that would like to make significant contributions financially. And now that we're still dealing with the day-to-day emergency, but we're also in a position to recognize this is the long game now, and financial resources will become more important. So, we might have some news as soon as next week on a Reading fund for contributions, which would be most welcome.
Awesome.
And again, Kevin will fill you in on a lot more on residents that need assistance. Goal 2, communications. That's a never-ending goal. Goal 3 is demobilization of town departments. That's effectively how to phase open all the various town functions. Timing very much TBA, but each department as of today has handed off to Command a list of how they would reopen, much like a business would, so we can discuss that and plan on that. I would have to say that based on yesterday's governor's press conference, the news on the schools was clear, but the other sneaky bit of news was daycare centers being closed to June 29th is definitely a message to the rest of the state. Do not expect the early May date to hold. There could be soft openings and phased openings, but it's not like the floodgates are going to open in May. And town departments will be the same. Will be phased opening, I'm sure. Goal 4, status of scheduled events, community events. These would be the big ones. I got in touch with the Lions Club today, for instance, on Friends and Family Day. Kevin may say a few more words about Memorial Day. The Fall Street Fair is around the corner. I know the schools are struggling with how to recognize graduation for the seniors, for instance. Goal 5, school summer and recreation program status. That's something that yesterday the Lieutenant Governor said would be addressed by the state within the next week or so. All communities are waiting to hear about that. We don't want to be the bad guy and close down those programs. But to me, it seems highly unlikely that summer programs would go as they normally would. Goal 6, develop plans to assist closed regulated businesses to reopen. Much like the town departments, we want to give assistance where we can. Jean and our economic development effort led by Erin are leading that charge. There's a lot of information for small businesses on the website, and she's in touch with businesses frequently. Goal 7, financial and budgetary issues. That's been a quiet one. If you start reading some of the national headlines, you'll see that other local governments and state governments have a financial disaster on their hands. That's because they can spend 7.5% to 10% a year. Fortunately, in Reading and in Massachusetts under Prop 2.5, we never opened the floodgates of spending, so our reductions will be much more modest than what you may read in the paper. We do not expect to be making 10% cuts to the school and town budgets, but there will be a different FY21 budget put in front of town meeting in a few weeks. And again, I'm working with the schools on that. Goal 8, public health response in Maven. Eleanor's covered that well. And goal 9 was an internal centralizing purchasing, just so we got it more efficient. And except for the fact the masks haven't come in, we're very efficient. So at that point, I'd like to turn it back to Kevin to talk a little more about what community services is up to.
Okay, thank you, Bob. I think when I was here several weeks ago, I reported that we were very happy that friends, family, neighbors had really stepped up to check on those most vulnerable. Since this all started, the Pleasant Street Center staff has made over 3,000 contact wellness calls to people, as well as responding to inquiries about for assistance. And friends, family, neighbors are still stepping up, and it's just great to see and great to hear that for the most part, people are still doing well. Not to say that there aren't people in need. But if people do have questions, they can call any number at the Pleasant Street Center. One is 781-942-6794, and we will get back to you. If we don't have a definite solution for you, we'll figure one out as we've done for the last month or so. A couple weeks ago, there was a hiccup with Meals on Wheels. Happy to report that is back up and running. Larry and Deb, they're still delivering between 90 and 95 meals each day. So they are back up and running. Right now, they are frozen meals versus in the past, they were hot meals that were delivered. But once people get them, they can heat them up. And that's going well. The food pantry, to the best of my knowledge, right now they're well funded, they're well stocked. And Kerry Valley told me that people they're kind of liking the new format versus going into the building. It's more of a drive up and people bring the product to them. And they're doing that on Fridays and Mondays, and they're actually seems to be going well. Initially, when we started this, we thought we might have food shoppers. That was our plan A. But with looking at that more, the contacts involved, we decided not to go that route. If somebody needed assistance, to have a list provided and going into a store. So we came up with plan B, which was to assemble some type of essential items. And Jean went shopping early one morning and she kickstarted that. We probably got about 10, 12 bags, and we delivered 4 or 5 of those within the first day. And just this past week, I don't know if I can share a few pictures, the Lions Club and the Young Women's League stepped up and went shopping and dropped off a lot of the bags that we want to provide to people. So if somebody can't go shopping or they can't make it to the food pantry, we have these bags ready to go. And again, we have over 20 that we can deliver. So again, thank you to the Lions Club. Thank you to the Young Women's League for stepping up and providing that product. It's really very helpful. And also we have a Plan C, which we've talked with Paul Jackson and the command. If it ever gets to the point where we can't meet the need from the food pantry or from what we have on hand at the Pleasant Street Center, we've talked about moving to a larger operation, possibly down at the field house. So that's being discussed. Hopefully we never get to that point. But again, it's there if we need it. Again, I'd just like to really thank the community. People have been very, very generous with money donations, gift cards, product, and just looking out for each other. It's been very encouraging, and I think we're up to the challenge to meet the needs of people that do need the help. Any questions on that part of it?
Board members, any questions? I'm looking around the room.
Kevin, is there any way to, like Bob said, run this for the long haul, at least for the next month easily? Is everyone, does that meet your needs the next 4 to 6 weeks of the way it's been going?
I believe so. Again, we've been referring people, obviously people losing their jobs and are hurting. We're referring people to the food pantry. I've talked with my contact down at the unemployment office, and they've been very responsive. I know somebody that works for the town whose husband just got his unemployment application approved. So one way or another, we'll figure it out. I think we're in good shape.
Have people been made aware of pandemic unemployment assistance that's just recently been announced?
Yes, that was one that somebody just actually got their application approved.
Great.
I think it took them 2 days.
Very good. So effectively for gig economy workers.
Exactly. Yep.
Gina, I think, has a comment.
Yeah, if I could
Jean?
just jump into, there's a letter on the website from Aaron Schaefer that I think just got updated today, and it just has the links that you can click to all these various programs. So we had a question about what's considered essential, non-essential businesses. Where do I go if I want to apply for this program or that program or this unemployment or that unemployment? And so that's all on the website now, and you can just click when you get to it under.
Sorry, should I go to the red zone?
I think that's the red, yeah.
Sorry. And this would be
Business, right there, CARES Act, and so there's, I think there's a letter. That's it, yep.
there you go. So the information is here right on the website and easily accessed.
Yeah, if you want to scroll down, that you can see the click here for the various programs. The pandemic unemployment
Oh,
and
I see. Yep.
fuel
So here-
assistance. And so you just click here and people can find what they're looking for. Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome. Other board questions?
Kevin, I sent actually an email to Bob and to Mark earlier today about food insecurity in Massachusetts, and the article was a Boston.com article that referenced how food pantries can't necessarily supply all of the need, and that some residents will be able to meet more of their food needs by applying for SNAP benefits. And I didn't know if that's something that the town has started assisting residents with, or if there have been any inquiries in that regard from residents.
Yes, Kerry Valleys has received quite a few, and both Kerry and I have both gone through the SNAP application online, and it's very, very simple.
Okay.
Fortunately, neither of us qualified. But they are very responsive, and Kerry has referred quite a few people to that.
Great, thank
And
you.
will continue to do so.
Very good, thank you.
Kevin, can I ask a question? If someone is finding themselves in need, should we had shown the slide before of the, I guess the town phone number, and there's kind of the non-emergency. Is that the preference to call that number?
You can call the Pleasant Street Center. You can do either one, the phone or the email. Will both reach us.
Great. I'll get the slide up.
And yeah, and they have worked.
There you go.
Exactly. Yep. So Kerry and I both received those.
Super. Any other board questions for first? Okay. Have there been any questions that came in from the public in regards to COVID-19?
No, I don't see any.
Okay.
I just had a few updates on the veterans.
Great. Yes, thanks.
Both the state level and the federal level have been very responsive. I've been able to, I added someone to the Chapter 115 rolls virtually, and I've also processed VA claims from home. So that's been set up well. And the checks will go out again the beginning of the month. Thank you to accounting and finance. They've been super. Memorial Day is about just a little over 4 weeks away. I was on a conference call with the Secretary of Veteran Services last week. He didn't cancel anything, but he said to start thinking creatively. And there will be more guidance coming out. I have a meeting with him tomorrow. So with that said, veterans will not be forgotten this year. It will look different, and I've been speaking with Bob about some plans on how we want to do things, and I've made some more progress this week. And I think beginning of next week, hopefully we'll have some guidance from the state, and I'll be able to share more information on what our plans are for Memorial Day. Again, it's probably going to look different, but we will not forget our veterans. And I think we have some good things in line. Any questions?
Awesome.
And then finally, recreation, the summer programs. Jennifer Fiorente, our rec director, was on a conference call with several hundred other rec directors yesterday, and they're just all holding their breath. Lieutenant Governor Polito is expected to make some announcements later this week as to how we move forward with parks and recreation. So once that guidance is out, Jenna and her crew will be ready to adjust accordingly to be safe.
Thanks, Kevin.
Well, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining. Any last questions for Kevin or for Eleanor?
Thank you both. Stay
Yeah,
safe.
thank you guys for joining us. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much for the good work.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome to stay as usual.
Thank you. I didn't know whether or not you needed me to stay on. It looked like there were a couple of questions that had been emailed in.
COVID-19 related or Board of Health related?
Board of Health related. There was one about staffing needs, and then there was one about PPE. So I think I've covered some of those. There were a few more questions. I didn't know if
From the packet.
Yeah, or was that from a free? Does that make sense? Did I read that correctly?
No, feel free to address things that were in the packet. We also are taking in emails during this meeting, and we just are monitoring to see if some of them related to questions for you specifically or for Kevin.
Okay, yeah, what I had seen in the packet, there was one from about related to public health from Nancy Doctor about funding, securing funding for the masks. We've already addressed the need for the masks. The only other update there is that the Office of Emergency Preparedness has given us $7,500. We haven't had a plan for that yet. At one point, we were considering masks. At another point, we were considering using that for potential staffing needs. So, for example, when we do reopen, and again, as Bob has said, that's going to be a phased approach. We are going to need more health inspectors, likely at least part-time, to get food businesses up and running. The other question was related to any steps the town has taken to hire an additional public health nurse. We have not currently taken steps to hire an additional public health nurse in line with the fact that currently we're able to manage those cases given what we have, and that we also have this opt-in program as sort of the backup. And then there was another question about whether or not how the Board of Health would recruit qualified and relevant volunteers for open positions, and how we would essentially evaluate those candidates. And so there are currently no open positions. We're a 3-member board, and then we have 3 members, and then we have 2 associates. And then the rationale, so we don't currently have any plans to do that. And the rationale would be to, as we have done with the current members, they go through an interview process, and then, as the select board gives the final appointment. And then there was another question about PPE litter that I addressed earlier, that we have gone out and visited the locations that had the complaints filed, and then also went to other grocery stores to just check. And then what I mentioned before about the bins and taking off the covers, and that we're also doing the public health campaign, just general education. And that the one that went out this week, I think it was earlier today, was about gloves. So those are the only emails that I saw that had come in that were in the packet that were related to public health. I don't know if there are any questions about that, or.
If I can just add one thing on the health inspectors. Yesterday on a state call for the Lieutenant Governor, I raised the point that a lot of communities share health inspectors. A lot of them work part-time for other communities. And that's our surplus capacity. So in other words, we really don't have surplus capacity statewide, and that the state had to be really cautious in how they reopened restaurants, because they would need inspections from inspectors that are dealing with other health issues. So the Lieutenant Governor and her team took that comment pretty seriously, and I think they're taking that into consideration. It's not a Reading issue, it's a state issue. So they will try to phase some sort of opening and recognize they don't want that bottleneck.
Okay.
Karen, go ahead.
Quick question under this general category, not necessarily related to the Board of Health. So last night, I understood for the first time that the Burbank Ice Arena has been open during this crisis. So as a non-essential business, they would normally have shut down. So while they're open, in case they're needed, they're running up expenses, electricity, things of that nature, running the machinery. So I'm not an expert, but I think that's a separate and distinct financial organization from the town, Bob, and they have to just, okay. So is any of the expenses that they run up during this time, is that something that they can track and submit for reimbursement through FEMA?
When you said they were open, what do you mean?
The refrigerators are turned on. The ice is turned on.
They're not open to the public.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I was in touch with Ed a few weeks ago and just told him to keep track. They are in our emergency management planning as a resource, and we assume or we hope that they will be reimbursed for costs like that, because he would have chosen to just be closed.
Exactly, and shut everything down, and they've been keeping the lights on, so to speak. So
right.
Okay. Yep. So do you talk to them on a regular basis?
As needed. I know Ed pretty well, so again, it was probably 3-4 weeks ago I spoke to him, and he knows.
Okay. I could probably share an email with you offline, and you can decide when you can talk to him. Thank you.
Yep.
Great.
Okay.
Those are any other comments. Thanks, Eleanor. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate your joining.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Good night.
Thanks for the work that you're doing.
Oh, you bet. Thank you. Bob, do you want to, you have some updates, and then I think you said Jean is going to have some updates as well.
Yeah, I just have, it was in your notes, but just to say to the community that National Grid did receive a permit from the state, and they will be replacing the gas main on Main Street before the road has got its final coat of pavement, so that's good news. And then I wanted to ask Jean to give an update on the Bagel World issue.
Sure. So the, Bob's referring to the trial road diet that was executed by MassDOT last week. And this has been in the works now for, I think I started getting involved in the idea of a road diet about 5 years ago. And so a lot of data and a lot of research and a lot of work has been done in the background by MassDOT. And then last summer and last fall, staff started to meet with MassDOT to give feedback and provide input. And so we realized that this road diet was going ahead. I think the board has had some updates on it. The timing, obviously, with COVID-19 is not ideal because we're in this unique time and things are not operating as they otherwise would be. And so things like traffic and drive-through businesses are really different than what we imagined it to be when we talked about executing this road diet. One of the unintended consequences of what I'm calling the perfect storm here is a nagging problem at Bagel World that has been traffic backing up onto the state highway, Route 28. That nagging problem turned into a safety problem after MassDOT put in the new striping. And we immediately convened with MassDOT and made them aware that this was a safety concern, a serious safety concern, so much so that they got a conference call together today with about 15 people from MassDOT. And so MassDOT, to their credit, took it very seriously. And they came up with a plan that I'd be happy to review on how to mitigate what's going on. So the backup that's happening at Bagel World is a result of the lane configuration as well as the increase in use of drive-throughs. And this is, I think everyone is aware that drive-through businesses have grown exponentially as a result of COVID-19. So being able to manage this now requires some steps to be taken to now modify and mitigate. And so those steps are, MassDOT has agreed to pay for daily police details until the new alteration of the lane configuration can be executed. And so what that will be is some new markings that will be installed to clarify and to simplify what this traffic configuration is going to look like and how it should operate. So the MassDOT contractor is available to start. They've indicated very soon and probably no later than next week with modifying the lane configuration. And so one of the major modifications is going to be the existing 6-foot shoulder will be expanded to 7.5 feet. And that will give more queuing space for cars backing up onto 28. An island will be painted, not a raised island, on the opposite southbound lane, which is the left turn into Bagel World. There'll be additional signage and dashed markings to warn drivers about this upcoming queuing area. And the signage will delineate the left lane and left turn, so there'll be added signage. And then at the entrance to Bagel World, there'll be some additional signage warning motorists that there's no standing. Then MassDOT will review the driveway permit that they issued to Bagel World and look at the nature of this problem, which I referred to earlier as a nagging problem and a nuisance problem, and see if they can regulate that through the driveway opening permit that they issued many years ago for this business. And so those are the steps that will be taken, but I think the most significant and immediate step, starting immediately, will be the presence of a police detail to manage the traffic at the cost of MassDOT in the project.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you to Carl for the photography work.
Yeah.
Great. Any questions? Vanessa?
Hi, Jean, I have a question. Thanks for the update. That's really helpful. I know a resident had reached out to Ann and myself about Bagel World, and they pointed out that there is a state law preventing stopping on state highway, which 28 is.
Yes.
So I wanted to flag that. I also want to be sensitive to the fact that this is a successful local business. So I want to be cognizant of safety issues that have been raised, and also, you know, not punish a successful business. So I don't know what that might look like, but that's my comment. Less of a question.
Yeah. The staff, myself, planning staff, public safety, we've had extensive interactions with the business owner about the concerns about the traffic spillover and the queuing spillover. And this, as I say, I've been involved in this for about 5 years. And I have to take my hat off to the police department, who spent an extraordinary amount of time doing just what you described, Vanessa, which is trying to work together to solve this. And they're just, it's a tricky one. And, you know, I've poured through plans and approvals and looked back to see if there's anything that the town can do to regulate further the design of this. And unfortunately, I won't bore you with zoning mumbo jumbo, but it's not an easy thing. In the way we do projects today, it would be very easy to address this. But this goes back almost 30 years ago. And it was a very, very, we don't even have this anymore. It's called a, basically an exempt review of sorts. And it was a perfunctory kind of non-review. So you would never do that today, but, you know, 30 years ago, things happened the way they happened and, you know, whatever. But today it would be a very intensive review, like we do all the projects. And if there were an issue, and it's built into zoning under site plan review, if there is an issue, we're able to go back and address it. So we're going to do the best we can with this and work with MassDOT, who I think through the driveway permit may have the ability to maybe have a little more success than we did in getting their attention, because if they're not able to access their business through the driveway, then they're going to have a big problem with their business. And so we've taken a soft approach, and you know, it is what it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Karen's hand. Sorry.
Sorry, forgot where the buttons were.
Carla, you're next. I'm sorry. I just looked down first.
Okay. Thank you, Jean. I appreciate it. And absolutely nagging is the right word. And it must be constant for the law enforcement, because you're like, oh, I'm not getting bagels today because it's back down to the highway again.
Yeah.
But I think the road diet looks terrific. So I think we need to be clear as we get used to this, that this road diet didn't create this problem. This problem was already there. Just extra highlighting. Thank you.
Carla.
Jean, has there been any correspondence that you're aware of with MassDOT and the owners?
No, this meeting that we had today, basically, I told MassDOT that this was a safety problem they were responsible for and they had to fix. And so the conversation today was really about how do we fix the safety problem? And then we talked generically about, you know, a business shouldn't have a queuing line that backs up onto a public way.
Well, no, I agree. And Reading is fortunate enough to have Bagel World because they're in other communities as well. And I'm sure all of us here on the screen and anybody watching, I can't say anything bad about Bagel World other than it backing up onto Route 28. But I'm hoping that, you know, and I suggested looking at the drive-through permit as well, offline. And, you know, we don't want to get into a fight with Bagel World, who's one of the more successful businesses, pandemic and non-pandemic, in town. So I'm hoping that with the better signage on the road and Bagel World is starting to pay attention, that what may come before them, well, hopefully they'll do the right thing.
Yeah, I think, as you say, they have, I think, at least 3 other locations, Salem and Peabody I'm very familiar with. There might be one more I'm forgetting. But the Peabody location I'm very familiar with has a very well-designed drive-through. It's in the southbound lane on Route 1 in Peabody. So it's a totally different site, so it's not comparable. But we have specifically worked on design ideas with them about modifying the drive-through. Anything could be modified and improved. So police have spent a lot of time actually almost practically designing that.
And when you referred to a detail supply, not supplied, paid for by MassDOT, it would be Reading Police or State Police?
Well, it's going to be per Chief Clark. He's thin on officers, so
Right.
It may be officers, as they do with a lot of the details, from other communities. Not state though, but local. They're the way they do their details, that they often can't get people who'll work them, so they'll reach out however they do that. But yeah, that's going to be billed right to the project, and the town will not have any expense on that.
Okay, and that's supposed to start when? Do you know? Sorry, did you say when that's going to start?
Immediately, so like tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thanks, Mark. Jean, on the topic of details, I think there are other businesses that have detail language written into their permit, right? I want to say the car wash.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was a different review process that the car wash went through. It was a more standard site plan review. And in that site plan review, one of the conditions was if there were a problem with traffic backing up, that a detail officer would be called and that the car wash would incur that expense. So that was written right into the decision.
So just for clarification purposes, the permits, are those renewed on a regular basis? Okay, once
No.
granted, they're grandfathered in?
It's a site plan review process that we do under zoning. And it's a one-time review of the actual plans and the actual way the site's going to work. There is no real provision beyond that. And it's actually an invention of local government. It's not statutory.
So if someone, if either the town or a group of residents wanted to have that revisited, what would that process look like?
There is no revisited. They've already been approved and they have their zoning, their approval, their occupancy permit. It was done almost 30 years ago.
Okay. Thank you, Jean.
Yep. We can talk zoning all night if you want.
Let's pass. Thanks, though. Great. Any board questions? No. Great. Thanks, Jean. Public comment. Do we have anything in the queue right now?
I don't see any emails. I think Gene might have chased them away.
Zoning.
Sorry, zoning.
Why don't we move forward into liaison assignments?
Thanks,
have
Gene.
that discussion. Yeah, thanks very much, Gene. Again, you are more than welcome to stay. Let me see. I have a slide here. Let me see if I can. I'm going to ask you folks what it's going to look like because I don't have my monitor today. Let me see if I can put this up. Is that legible at all, or is that just way too small?
Mark,
Yes.
did we want to do liaison reports or jump into liaison assignments?
Excuse me. You are absolutely correct. I am confused. Let me turn this back off. We're going to go on to liaison reports. Thank you very much, Vanessa. Liaison reports, please. Do we have any liaison reports? Vanessa, you have a liaison report?
I do. Thank you. So Karen and I attended the RMLD Board of Commissioners meeting last night. And they did review the payment to the town of Reading. Initially they were planning on voting, but there was some concern that some of the language had been changed and the proposals had been altered a little bit from what had previously been discussed. So they're going to be discussing it at their next meeting. I did ask if an updated version of the proposal could be forwarded to the full select board so that everyone here could review it in advance of their meeting.
Great. So that's something that they'll be doing in the next day or so?
I imagine within the next week. There was some data that needed to be updated and some figures that needed adjusting.
Great. And then can you give maybe just a top line of what it looked like? Obviously, we need to look at it in some more depth, but what was the essence?
It was similar to what had been reviewed previously by the board with the factor being 3.85. Karen, does that sound right? Based on a 3-year average. Now, one of the things that's requiring a little bit of an adjustment is that due to COVID-19, usage is down. And based off of projections that they are gathering from Europe, they anticipate usage to continue to see a decrease potentially for some months to come. So there will be an effect on the payment to the town of Reading. The exact numbers have not been quantified yet, but they would take effect for the July 1, 2021 payment. So one of the main reasons I wanted to bring this up is Bob, for you, as you look to put forward and finalize the 2021 budget, this will be a factor, and we don't know exactly what that number is going to be just yet. You're muted, Bob.
Oh, you're on mute, Bob.
If it's to start July 2021, it won't impact next fiscal year, which is good news for next year.
Oh, apologies, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Anything else on that, Vanessa, Karen? No, any board questions? Great. I think the other thing is I received a letter from the CAB discussing the 20-year agreement and renewal. And so we'll need to put that onto one of our future agendas to at least discuss that. We may even want to kind of hear a little bit more from them as part of that discussion. So,
yeah, they're looking for it expires the end of May. So they were Vanessa explained that we had been focused on COVID-19 issues and we had been unable to discuss this as a board, but she would bring it up in her liaison report.
So for other board members, there is something called the 20-year agreement. We won't spend much time on it, but every 10 years it needs renewal, despite the fact that it's called a 20-year agreement. Every 10 years it comes back up. And I guess each of the communities that's involved with RMLD signs it, or has definitely in the past. And the renewal asks us to sign it by, I believe, the end of May. And Colleen, I think not everyone has signed it yet, but it's something that should come onto our radar in one of our next few meetings. Great.
Mark?
Yes, Carl, sorry.
Is there any consideration, I don't know if the ladies was it part of the meeting if it's going to be extended, or is the end of May the end of May? No other consideration for what we're dealing with.
Vanessa, oh, sorry. I don't know if you were muted or talking to us. So I received this note maybe in the last few weeks, just asking us to sign it by the 31st of May, which was consistent with what's been happening in the past. And I haven't heard any discussion beyond that. I know at least one community has signed it of the four. But I don't know more than that at this point.
Okay.
Well, Vanessa can
Certainly
correct me, but they were really hoping that we could stick to the end of May because the discussions have been going on for a while. They, and you, so this back and forth has been going. So they described it as a compromise. So it won't be all new. It'll just be an update of what the previous select board had reviewed. So they were really hoping that, we could get it wrapped up and move on.
And just to clarify, the payment that is being talked about is what's called the below the line payment. I think what we need to do is have a discussion about the whole RMLD for our board. Update everybody so everybody's on the same page as to what's being discussed and what's happening. But in very briefly, this 20-year agreement covers what's called the above the line payment, which relates to 2% of their net assets, and then that's allocated across each of the communities according to how much energy is consumed. So that's what's been in that agreement consistently. It also provides that there can be a below the line payment, and there was a series of litigation and other things that took place. The discussion that what the RMLD is talking about for the town of Reading payment is what they call the below the line payment and what amount that will be. So it's mentioned in the 20-year agreement, but it's not defined in the 20-year agreement. But by the way, the 20-year agreement says it's optional.
Can I just ask Karen a clarifying question? So Karen, when you said there's slightly revised language that the board may not have seen, you meant on the payment, not on the 20-year agreement, right?
And we were just talking about the numbers. Go ahead, jump in, Vanessa. It was all about the numbers last night. They kind of have a counter proposal, which they see as a compromise based on the work that had been done already. And Vanessa asked them to send it to us.
I just wanted to make sure there wasn't any discussion about changing the terms of the 20-year agreement, because I am in touch with the other three communities and know what their status and plans are. I just wanted to be able to make sure we knew what was what.
That's correct, Bob. So there are two issues. One is the payment specifically to Reading because RMLD resides here in town. And the other is the 20-year agreement that affects all four communities that make up RMLD. So yes, the discussion that Karen and I are talking about here is the payment specifically for the town of Reading, and that's what we'll get, where we'll receive some updated information from RMLD. And the 20-year agreement is a separate issue that I do think we need to discuss. Mark, when we get down to the agendas, we can talk about when to place these, but I think the payment one is the most pressing, and we should do that as soon as we have that information available.
Great. Well, as we're meeting weekly, we are in a very good position to address that soon.
I do see you just got a related question in.
Sorry, I'm not in front of my email. Here we go. From Dan Ensminger, 6 Oakland Road. Did anyone ask RMLD why they are not bonding their capital projects through the town? They could spread the expense over 20 years if they did that and maybe not have to cut Reading's payment as much. Karen, do you want to address that one?
Sure. I asked our town manager that question in my last meeting as a finance committee member, and about how that would work and whether we would do that for RMLD if they chose to do that in today's amazingly low rates. And Bob said he would be happy to do that with appropriate lead time. And so Vanessa and I made a point that as soon as they started talking about their revenues being down, that we reassured them that the town can absolutely do that for them. It was a gentle reminder.
So
yeah, go ahead.
To tack on to what Karen said, she did raise that. There is, I think, just a philosophical difference in how they approach capital expenses and debt, which is that they, the commissioners, as a general philosophy, prefer not to incur debt even though, the town has a slightly different approach, especially given the very low rates that Bob has talked about and that Karen just mentioned. So we did remind them that is in fact an option. They did say that they would keep that in mind, but there was no immediate interest, I could say.
Yeah, and I think to Dan's question, a number of members have brought up that topic. So certainly they're aware it's a possibility, and that's a decision that they would need to take. Thank you. Okay, so let's roll to liaisons, not liaison reports, but liaisons this time. Let me see if I can get that slide to show up, and I'm going to ask you to let me know, is it too small to be useful? Because I can make it larger.
I can see that.
Okay, so this is a list, and it's actually, there are 2 columns, but my guess is if I make you both columns clear at the moment, you won't be able to see the whole thing. So let's start with the one. I took the list that we had from before of the different boards and committees, and I took also what we had looked at last year. So that included some other projects, capital projects, Oakland Road, and some of the construction projects. I listed them all here, and I indicated, Bob collected from each of you, I believe, some preferences in terms of what you would like to participate with if you had your druthers. And so the coding here, I'm just going to go smaller. C means current. It's a current activity. D means somebody said it was a desire. And then this is what was shared in the packet. And then I came back from the packet, and this is kind of the document that starts with it. There's a slight drop of color coding, and this was my personal coding, just thinking about which of these items, which of these committees right now are very active. And in my opinion, at least these are the ones that we should be covering pretty much one-to-one. And perhaps there are others that other people prefer. I don't have any problem changing that, but these are ones I thought we needed to make sure we had covered. So if we start, actually, I may try to shrink it just a little bit. Let me see what happens. Tell me if this is that too small?
Okay.
Okay, so now you can see everything. So what I indicated here is the columns going across after board and committee represent our initials, the 5 of us. The C is current. The D is somebody indicated that they would have interest in that one. What we had talked about last time, and again open for discussion, is that we would each take a very manageable number of these. And manageable is certainly within a handful. And we talked, in fact, 3, I think, was the first thing that we talked about. Take kind of that one-to-one responsibility for those. And then my thought was that perhaps we would then divide up the rest of the list so that we, whoever that person was, could reach out to the chair and the new chair that'll be in July, and just say, hey, I'm the liaison from the board, just introducing myself. If you have any questions or comments or want our participation or to join one of our meetings, contact me, and I'll kind of shepherd you into the group. So that was just kind of put out there for folks' thoughts. Does that still make sense? Kind of, let's see if we can pick 3 or 4, something like that each. Let's see where there are clear ones, or if there are others, we can decide which ones to change. And again, the yellow was just kind of my thoughts, and I'm happy to use other colors if people prefer other choices. So kind of from the top, audit committee, it's I think we do 2 audits, one for RMLD and one for the town. It's 2 meetings. If someone else is dying to do it, that's fine with me. Otherwise, I'm happy to cover it. I'm not seeing anybody jumping. Fine.
I'm a little confused about actually about the approach. So in terms of but you just mentioned something that's not highlighted, and I thought we were going through and assigning what was highlighted. So what are we doing with, what's the expectation around those that are not highlighted, or we're still assigning people to those?
So I think, to your point, let's first go through the ones that the board feels there should be a one-to-one relationship now, like assigning it now. Let's make sure we can cover those, and then we can talk about the other ones. And sorry, I went out of order because I saw my name next to the audit committee. So my apologies.
Mark?
Yes, please.
If I may, the only other one, so I agree with all of your highlighting. I think those are the key ones. The only one I would add is the Zoning Board of Appeals, the ZBA. That one may not be seeing a lot right now or in the next however many weeks or months that are COVID-19 affected. But that's a pretty significant one that we get a lot of comments from residents when there are significant projects underway.
Great. Now highlighted. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the thought on here also, folks, was that we would have one person assigned as the liaison. If that person needs assistance for one reason or another, there's an important meeting that they can't attend or whatever, then they could essentially reach out and see if there's another board member that would be able to cover. But other than that, they'd be the main liaison. So that's the operating principle that we have here. So let's kind of go to the top. So Board of Health is the first one. Anne, you are currently doing that. If you're still interested, I think that's a great continuation.
That is okay. I'm happy to do that. I haven't been able to attend their many meetings, but I have a pretty regular dialogue with the chair.
I think that's fine, and I think the other side of that would be asking the chair and the members to reach out if they have specific issues. They do come to the command meeting on Mondays, and thus far I'm attending those virtually, of course. And so I'm happy to share any information that comes from that as well.
Very good. And are they planning to attend our meetings weekly throughout the pandemic still?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Oh, Mark, I have a question. So it looks like there are 11 highlighted, with the VASC having 2. So is it fair to say that we would each take 2, with a couple of us taking on sort of an additional 1 or 2?
I think that some of them have a slightly heavier commitment, so it may be that 2, and maybe some others are going to end up with 3, taking 3, possibly 4, but I'd say let's limit it to 4. And that again is this kind of one-to-one notion. And just to be clear, also we talked about a difference between how the expectations would be set in the past. The expectations were attending as many of the meetings as you possibly can, and really not being a part of the committee, but being present on a very, very regular basis. I, for one, and I think some other members also found that to be very, very difficult to accomplish. There aren't enough nights in the week to get that done. So the thought was that we would attend some of the meetings. We would definitely be in touch with the chair, vice chair, and establish a two-way relationship and a two-way discussion. So whenever the chair, vice chair have issues or questions, they would be very comfortable reaching out. So, that okay? So let's start with the yellow one. So Board of Health, we just did. Council on Aging, I heard someone the other night say senior member, and I wasn't sure if that was senior comma member or senior member. But I would be happy to work with the Council on Aging and think that that's an important one. So if folks don't have an issue with that, I would suggest that. Okay. Finance Committee. So we need
I'm actually one of the current liaisons, but I can hand that off.
Does someone want to take on the Finance Committee? So do you want
I'd be willing to, depending on how everything sort of plays out.
Okay.
Yeah, same here.
Let's hold that one to the side for a second. Okay. Sorry. Human Relations Advisory Committee. Anne.
I do think it makes sense. If you're highlighting that one, I think it makes sense for me to continue with that, with with the work of the ad hoc committee, as the ad hoc committee is hoping that the future human rights related organization will subsume ATRAC. And in fact, current ATRAC leadership is on board with that, and that is the direction they would like to go. So to the extent we, will after this agenda item be addressing that, and if I am able to continue with that work, I think it all works together.
Okay, great.
Mark, I just realized CPDC isn't on that list either, and I found.
Oh.
Sorry to keep adding to the list.
All right, these are easy to change.
But that's I got to be honest. That's a big one, especially as we talk about economic development, which we did a bit of last year. They're a very important board or commission technically, and I think they definitely deserve sort of priority.
Okay, so Carlo, you've indicated interest in that one, in CPDC.
Yes.
And you're also on ZBA, is that right?
I chose it as my third pick. If I was going in order. And what I sent Bob.
Yep.
Right.
Are there others that have interest in one or the other of those groups?
I have interest in CPDC. I've done it previously. I will say doing CPDC and CBA can be difficult, even if we decrease the expectation of attending meetings. I would recommend having different people for them, depending on people's interest.
Carlo, what are your thoughts?
CPDC was my top pick. I mean, not to throw anyone under the bus, but kind of have the most experience at this department. But if, I'd be willing to arm wrestle somebody for it if that's what it comes to.
No, I'm fine with that.
Vanessa, do you have interest in ZBA?
Let's table ZBA until we go through some of the others.
Okay.
Okay.
We're trying here. We're trying.
Mark,
Committee.
Mark, if I might.
Sure.
We have an email from someone you're familiar with, the board received. I would suggest if you're picking up Ann and her suggestion on staying on the ad hoc committee, you do need another member, a second member, and you probably should do that tonight.
Yeah, so in the motion that we're going to look at tonight and
extend it.
The structure, there actually are two members of the board anticipated there. But I think that if there are two members, then I think we should have two members listed here as liaison, if that makes sense. And what's your feeling on that?
That sounds right to me.
Okay.
Should we read the email as public comment?
Sorry, I haven't been monitoring. So this is from Linda Snowdoxer, 110 Beaver Road, Reading, Massachusetts, downstairs. Hi, just a heads up that the ad hoc for the Human Rights Organization does not seem to be on this list of liaison positions. I'm not sure if Ann Johnson Landry is assumed to be that liaison, or does there need to be another person appointed to co-chair with Ann? Thank you for your consideration. So we do want to get to, so is there another person who would be interested in taking on that role? As the second member, I guess, is what we would hope to do with the resolution that's coming up, with the motion that's coming up. But here, as it relates to liaison.
For the current ATRAC.
It's actually not for ATRAC.
Oh.
It would be for the ad hoc committee on human rights, which is looking at creating and establishing a new human rights related organization in town that would subsume ATRAC, or that is at least what the ad hoc committee has discussed, and that ATRAC is on board with.
And you're on both right now, right? You're the ad hoc and the,
I am currently one of the co-chairs of the ad hoc committee, and I am the select board liaison to HRAC, but I am not a voting member of HRAC, but I am a voting member of the ad hoc committee.
okay. And who are you the co-chair with?
I was the co-chair with Andy Friedman.
Okay, gotcha.
So I think that the structure of that, again, that'll come to the motion, is going to be that we want 2 select board members to participate, or that's the desire of that group. So why don't we hold that one for a little bit, but I think we need to come back and find a second member.
I'll take it, Mark. That's fine. I mean, I'm interested.
I like the idea of holding it because you really need to see how many, like, what the weighting is. If you can't be on too many committees that are going to be heavy, too many yellows is what, and Vanessa went through earlier. We're going to have to spread ourselves around the yellows.
Okay.
So I'm going to tell you what, let's do this. Let's put a question mark there. How's that?
I mean, you can put a question mark underneath there too. I just
We don't actually need another HRAC liaison.
Sorry, it's ad hoc, correct?
Correct.
Right.
We need a new,
Okay.
Co-chair.
right, and we need a new probably column somewhere, or not,
Row?
to list a new committee somewhere on there.
And it's called ad hoc human rights.
That's fine. Ad hoc committee on human rights. That's usually the way I describe it.
Oops. Sorry,
I think it's, I think the name is an ad hoc committee to establish a human rights related organization, but that's a bit of a mouthful.
Got it. Sorry, this is misbehaving for me at the moment.
It's a nice group of people, and who have done quite a bit of work already. If you have interest in work relating to civil rights, human rights, identifying and working to heal inequities in our society, it's good work. And if you're interested in, what would make for the most effective way to deliver those services, the ad hoc committee itself is looking at what structure can best effectuate those goals for the town. So that is what it's not doing the actual work of delivering those services and meeting those needs, but it's looking at what kind of organization is best equipped to do so in our community.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I've got kind of the 2 question marks there. You'll pardon the not quite alphabetical order for the moment. So next on the list is recreation. We have 2 people interested in recreation. Vanessa, do you have some feedback on that? Because you've been on recreation, and I think there were 2 of you on recreation.
There was, I think recreation's pretty light lift. They meet monthly. I have enjoyed it. I've done it for 2 years. I think, anyone could fairly easily manage this one. Who's it? Carlo, or myself. I mean, if we want to go through the ones that are heavier lifts first within the yellow and then see where we all end up, and some of these secondary ones that are, I think, important, but not as demanding from a time perspective, we can see what makes sense. Carlo, does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to take it just because I'm new and I've been coaching, and I guess given what you just said,
your plate is looking pretty full. So I'm going to warn you.
Yeah, it's more out of a cautionary tale more than anything else.
Right. No, I understand, but I think we want to do what our interests are too, on the heavy stuff. And if someone's willing to do it, whether it's me or someone else, I hope I wouldn't discourage someone. I think you're trying to discourage me.
No. I think that we're trying to figure out maybe setting even higher priorities, making sure that picking whatever a few of the heavy lifts per person, and then maybe some other things have to fall off. And it can be any of the above. It's not, it has to do this and not that one. It's just a concern that it can be too much. And not having experienced it to kind of suggest that, hey, let's take a look and maybe we readjust. We say, yeah, but maybe not that one. And again, I'm not being specific to recreation or any other one. I'm just thinking about it.
There's also something to be said for each of us having an even distribution of what's a heavy lift. And the other reason I say that is some of these that have heavy lifts are more high profile from the perspective of having a significant impact on the community than others. And so I think it makes sense that each board member have an opportunity to be involved in some of these bigger committees.
So maybe what we'll do here is instead of using kind of C's and D's, we're going to put 1s and 2s and 3s next to people's names. And that way try to get to the priorities and then look at it and say, wow, that's just going to be, too much or it's fine.
You did that.
Does that make sense? I'm just thinking, otherwise I think we're going to have trouble allocating these. I think we're going to keep circling around them. Let's see if we can make other progress. Public safety. So I feel like with command, I'm kind of doing that at the moment. And I know you've indicated interest in that one as well.
I'm fine with you continuing to participate in command as chair. I think that's perfectly fine. I had been one of the public safety liaisons last year, and so was interested in continuing that to be able to kind of continue and build upon the relationship that and interactions that I had with Chief Clark and Chief Burns. I'd be interested in that, but I was not looking to replace you on command calls or anything like that.
So I think what we're running into is, as much as we're trying to get one person per, we're finding that there are a number of them where we really think that 2 makes more sense.
Yeah, I see a few of them, but there's 2.
So, the constraint, I guess, is these aren't actually subcommittees. Is that correct? Or are they considered?
No, we're not creating a subcommittee.
So having 2 liaisons does not mean it is a subcommittee, because the subcommittees have been historically created to achieve a certain goal or to work towards a certain project. The idea behind having 2 liaison assignments or joint liaison assignments is that people can tag team. So what I've done in the past when I have a co-liaison is I'll say, are you able to make this meeting, or I'll go. And so it helps sort of spread the demand on our time.
So
there's pros and cons to that too. So yeah. I don't know what the right answer is, but that's what we've.
Yeah. So if people don't object and we allowed that there could be 2 liaisons for some of these groups, then we really don't have any issues where we need to have an arm wrestle. It may be the opposite. It may be people saying, okay, now let's take a look at the list and see what's going on here.
How about I like your 1, 2, and 3. Another concept would be a primary and a secondary, or?
Yeah, I think if we could assign it that way and then the 2 people could work that out, maybe that's an okay way to do it. What we haven't done though is I'm looking down here and we've got school committee, which is a heavy lift.
That was also one of the ones that I had, but I would also prefer to pass that on to someone else.
So is there someone who would like to be more actively engaged in that one? Aha.
That one is a heavy lift.
That's a heavy lift.
Potentially. Well, it may not actually be that heavy a lift if you're not expected to go to all the meetings.
Yeah.
So in fact, if it's simply, making yourself available to the chair for questions
Mhm.
and open communication, then that will be what it will be, and may in fact not be a heavy lift at all.
Isn't the budget season a heavy lift? Pretty much.
If you try to go to all of the meetings, absolutely.
Just thinking that through for a second, the last few years, both most of the finance committee members, and I think many or most of the select board members attended most of the school committee meetings for budget presentations.
Mhm.
I think it's maybe, are there 4 meetings perhaps, or 3 or 4 meetings, and then the vote. I think we were pretty much all there, or I remember seeing colleagues there and sometimes posting because we were concerned that everyone was going to be there. So I'm not, again, I think, having one person who is working most closely with the chair makes sense. Attending some of the meetings, while they're virtual, the travel time is certainly cut down. We need to circle back to that one. I think that's an important one for someone to participate in fairly closely. The Reading Coalition is another one that I think is pretty important. I'm willing to participate in that. Unless someone really wants
Reading
that.
Coalition has sometimes been, while it's separate on the list, what I've seen is that whoever handles public safety also handles Reading Coalition. It makes sense since the coalition falls under the police department. We don't have to do it that way, but there's a logic to it.
Yeah. Anne, would that work for you as well?
If in that case, I might have you take on public safety. Although I'm trying to keep what I have to a manageable list.
Okay, it's time for the 1s and 2s. I think that's the only way we're going to go through this now.
If I can add something on the coalition, it's probably best that you don't vote anything because that's not a formal assignment you're making. The coalition director is just inviting people who are interested. So it's just a semantics thing. If you
Right.
decide who's interested, she'll invite you.
Right.
Got it. Okay, very good. So why don't we just come back to the top here? All right. So ad hoc human rights. Does someone want to join with Anne?
I'll do it.
Is that where we're going? Okay.
Very good.
Board of Health, Anne, that's going to stay. So that's great.
Okay.
I'm just going to go to the kind of the ones from it. So CPDC. Carlo, you want to own that one?
Oh yeah, I'm in. Oh yeah, I'm in. Yeah.
Okay. Council on Aging, I'm in for that. Finance Committee.
And if you don't want to, I'm happy to. I didn't want to be all grabby. But I'm just saying, like, that's why I was like, is this going to be like Monopoly? We're going to trade Park Place for St. James or whatever.
So Anne and Karen, any preference between you?
I'd indicated I'd prefer to hand that one off.
Okay. Why don't I help you out then? Okay.
Okay. And so HRAC, we're going to leave as is, just with Anne. Recreation, so we have 2 people. Is that okay? Carlo and Vanessa?
I think it's fine. I think of all of the committees, it's not one of the ones I would think needs 2 liaisons, if I'm just going to be honest, given that they only meet monthly. We can always attend or post if there's a subject of interest, but I would say that one really only needs 1.
If one of you has a strong desire, great. If not, I'd say leave it and then let's see how the rest of the things unfold.
Yeah, I'll voice my desire, and then if Vanessa wants to be the second, or we can do it together, or what, we can discuss it.
I'm leaving it for now. ZBA.
ZBA, I will take your guidance. Whoever suggested it, I think it was Vanessa. So, again, these are things I'm very interested in,
Yep.
and somewhat knowledgeable, and not to the level of the board, but I am willing to, If someone else wants that one, I'll be willing to be a second or give it up if we think that's a one-person job.
I mean, I can take ZBA. I don't have a strong feeling on that one, but I think it'd be fine.
Okay.
Again, our hope is many hands makes for kind of a lighter load for everybody, but let's see. Public safety, I'm fine with that structure. I can stay involved on the command side and you on kind of.
I could be, I guess, like a secondary.
Yeah, everything non-command is fine. So let's do that. RMLD, Vanessa, stay with that. And then as it more specifically, if there's clean energy related activities, Karen, it looks like you expressed an interest. Did I read that right?
Yeah, or even just being like the secondary, the tag team. I think if we're going to make any progress on clean energy and some of these other electrification initiatives, we need to work more closely with them. So no subcommittees, but I'd love to help out since I've been working with them as a FinCom member.
Great.
I think that's great. I think having two for RMLD is great.
Okay. So that leaves us at school committee. I mean, I'm happy to participate. I'm just worried that I'm not going to be able to handle all of this.
I think if school committee, if the expectation there is to simply be a point of contact,
Right.
then I'm fine with that one. If the expectation is to attend a lot of meetings, that's going to become tougher.
Right. I think it can't be an expectation to attend a lot of meetings. When there is something of particular interest, probably multiple board members will attend.
Right. And budget season's a perfect example of that, like Mark mentioned. So.
Right.
Okay. So I think that we have the I'm going to unyellow the coalition for right now. I think we've got them covered. Come on. There we go. So if that's okay with everyone, oops.
So we still don't have an, do we have a primary for recreation?
I think that we left that as an arm wrestle.
It was one of my top two choices. That's all I'll say. I mean, I'll leave it at that.
I'm just looking over the list here. Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine.
I know we don't have it highlighted, but I had indicated a preference in staying on as the library trustees liaison. I think it makes sense, particularly with my work with the ad hoc committee, since the ad hoc committee is proposing for the organization effectively to be within the library. It's also, it would provide some continuity for me, much like with public safety, where I could continue to work and develop the conversation and relationship with our library director.
I think that works. That's great. I've yellowed it and now we're in.
Was that a two-person board last year or a one-person? I mean, a liaison. Sorry, was that one or
For
two?
the library was one.
Okay.
I think when we had the building going on, the construction going on, then we had a person focused on that as well, I think.
Okay.
Okay, so instead of kind of using a lot of time here, since we're going to be meeting next week again, why don't I take this, consolidate it, make sure it works for everybody, take a look at the remaining list, and then if you have any dibs, why don't you send them to Bob? If not, I'm going to just divide them up. Vanessa?
What about the VASC? There's 3 of you listed. That I think is one that's going to be the most timely as we approach those interviews and reviews and new applicants, but it is a subcommittee of 2.
Right. So that actually is an agenda item, not the next one, but the one that follows.
Great.
And then with respect to, I think I've listed as D for desired for communications. We had or Vanessa and I have been the communications. I think we're I don't know if we're both current and desired, but and maybe this is for the agenda item where we talk about social media policy, but Vanessa and I were thinking of it would make sense to disband the subcommittee, and for us to take on work separately, that we could bring back as individual members to the full board.
Got it. Okay. If you folks are okay with it, then I'll take what's here. I will, let me save it. Let's be smart. Save it. I will summarize it in terms of the ones that we've assigned here. I'll make a list of those that are not assigned. And I was going to suggest kind of, if you want, I'll just randomly kind of go through and assign each of us to something. Unless I saw that you had a preference somewhere that wasn't otherwise mentioned. And unless someone has dibs on certain things, that's great. Other than that, why don't I just go through it that way and assign it that way?
One comment, I didn't see the MAPC on there on the list before, so I didn't realize that's something that might fit well with the RMLD and the Climate Advisory Committee, because that's where Green Communities is located, if that's what that is, MAPC.
Okay.
So maybe we could wrap that in.
Great.
And Mark, for climate advisory, I know Karen feels passionately about this. I'm happy to take a back seat on that one if she wants to be primary, and I can attend if needed or appropriate.
Great. Okay, the other questions where we had a few other groups that were gathering. One was related to construction projects. We had a member kind of be a point of contact to them. Bob, you and I talked a little bit about this, I think, the notion of how much of this is still needed and for which projects, or if the board thinks that this is a good idea in general. And then if so, what's the role? What exactly are we expecting? And we probably should get some consistency in terms of the expectation. What do folks think about that?
I'll take Bob's guidance for now to see what he says.
Bob, any thoughts?
The comment I shared with Mark was that I don't think this worked very well last year, if only because residents contacted whichever board member they felt like contacting. And the fact that there was a lead person on a given project may or may not have been important. So from that perspective, and some of your board members, clearly stated, if someone contacts me, I'm going to deal with them, which is certainly your call. So I think from that perspective, it's hard to channel neighbors or people into just one board member because you happen to have an assignment, as opposed to, people you may just know in the community.
What if we take it away, folks? Vanessa.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that the idea behind it was good. I think it was just tough to execute. So what we could do is, if there is a scenario where there's a need for us to reach out or to communicate or act as liaisons between perhaps the developer or the town residents, then we can assign that on an as-needed basis.
Does that work for everybody?
Yep. Yes.
I think so.
Okay, great. Capital projects on Oakland Road, the other two things. So there was a capital projects, the subcommittee word, I think.
Yeah, it was.
So, Vanessa, what are your thoughts on cap projects?
I mean, I think we've learned that the subcommittees really make it challenging to make progress. Again, I think it was a creative idea, it just didn't quite work out. One, I think Oakland Road, we ended up just collapsing into capital projects, so I would suggest disbanding that one. Well, and those are actually subcommittees, so we would need to disband. We can't just remove from the list.
Uh-oh.
So that's true for Oakland Road as well as capital projects. As far as capital projects goes, I mean, a lot of, I think there's something to be said for setting some kind of plan in place and having someone lead what that may look like. help get the board moving, because, you know, for the last few years, Bob has been saying that we have these capital projects. There's not room in the plan for them. So how are we going to move them forward? I think it would be helpful if someone could work with Bob on discussing those a little bit more in depth than we have.
The other thing I'd bring up is that when we did the select board retreat back in about 20 years ago, I think, we talked very specifically about how to solicit input from the community about priorities. And I think that was one of the big pieces that we wanted. And I know, Bob, you talked about this also in terms of there's going to be a limit. I mean, there's a limit, period. Where are the priorities so that we can, you know, think about how to, you know, what can and can't we do? So I think it's important that we work on it, whether the subcommittee is the right structure for it. You know, generally, I think we found that subcommittee didn't work very well. It didn't promote more discussion. If anything, it promoted less. Mm-hmm. So I personally would be comfortable kind of getting rid of the subcommittees and then making this one of our priorities. And by the way, we had a lot of discussions and a lot of plans that we were going to have some, get Jane Wellman to update us and get all of us back together and get kind of that retreat going so that we could talk about what our priorities are individually and collectively as a board. And COVID-19 kind of stuck its nose into this thing in front of it. So we need to come back to that, and we probably should think about doing that. You know, maybe that's an agenda item that comes up fairly soon. And I would suggest we put capital projects into that category and just keep ourselves honest that, look, within 2 months, 3 months, whatever the right time frame is, I don't think it's a week or two. I don't think that's going to make a difference. But in the next several months that we address it and we start to figure out kind of where we're going to be, what our finances look like. There will be some capital projects. We should solicit input on what makes the most sense.
Mark, yeah, I like the idea of tabling it for now, so to speak, and then, you know, when time serves to have a retreat or something to that effect, because Karen and I, as the new members, need to get caught up to speed on certain things, even though they're all public. But I agree with you. You know, COVID-19 has taken over our lives, and whether it's a liaison or not, I agree with a lot of points made, but some of them, I think the board needs to address this as a board. Maybe having someone be a point person is good to get more detail, but I think as a board, of the meetings I've watched in the past as a citizen, it was, you know, there was always something going on as a capital project, and now everything's on hold. So I'd like to see maybe a retreat in the next several weeks put on the books, and then revisit that when the time is needed, and an ongoing conversation, of course, of what Bob deems as a top priority.
The only thing with the retreat, sorry, go ahead, Bob.
If I might add, I'm just going to agree with your timing sense. Not to get too far ahead of myself, but you're definitely going to see an FY21 budget that suggests less capital. That should be pretty obvious.
Right.
And for the capital projects that I think the board is generally talking about and interested in, it's pretty substantial public input, which just isn't possible right now.
Right.
So I don't think this is an urgent issue and won't be for several months to do the kind of discussions you want to do on the projects you're thinking of.
So why don't let's table the topic for now. I don't think the subcommittees are planning any meetings, nor are they complete anyway, right?
No, I'm one member of that, and John was the other, so I'm the committee of one at the moment. But I'd be fine with disbanding it and revisiting as a board priority. I think that makes sense.
Okay, let's take this off the slide here. If the board's comfortable, I will summarize, come back with kind of the list of what we did and what we didn't. Make sure that everyone's in agreement with that. Divvy up the list of what we didn't, or I can take a pass at it and a little horse trading, and then finish it next Wednesday. Is that all right?
Yeah, I mean, before we move on, we had a public comment on the volunteer boards. I don't know if you want to address that.
Please, sorry, I haven't been watching email, so please feel free.
at about 8:33 from Meredith Reed, 31 Van Norden Road. Hello, choosing Vanessa Alvarado for any volunteer / liaison board is out of
Yeah,
turn.
Carlo, I'm gonna call that out of order.
Okay. It's a public comment, but that's your choice.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think that we're all serving on the board until we're not. Okay, let me take that one off. Sharing is off the screen. Okay, next is the human rights ad hoc, and you probably want me to put up a slide, yes?
Yes, that you kindly created, I believe, earlier today based on your PowerPoint proficiency.
Yeah. Let's see. So, sorry, just give me 1 second. I'm going to get rid of the Excel things.
So I've taken the language of the current set structure for the ad hoc committee, replaced the names that have been brought to us by the school committee and library board of trustees, and then we'll need to add Carlo's name in. Bob has reminded me that Ray would say that there is no such legal term as co-chair. So I don't know if anyone has any objection. It'd be fine. It would be fine with me if we wanted to structure it instead as chair and vice chair. But in the spirit of the ad hoc committee, we work in a pretty egalitarian way by way of consensus building. So certainly that would be the approach, or my approach, at least going forward. I don't know if anyone has any objection to continuing to use the term co-chair, which I'm happy to share that title with Carlo.
I don't have any feeling.
That's fine.
Either way, yeah. Sorry, I'm having trouble getting this slide to share itself.
Okay.
Give me 1 more second. I'll get it up.
Okay, I can also read the motion. I had sent it actually last week during the course of our meeting to the full board, as my expectation had been at that meeting that we would be taking this up, but then we had chosen to take this up in the context of liaison assignments. So let me pull that up. Okay, so I can read the motion. I move to. Okay.
Will it be on screen now? On number 2 here? Are you guys seeing the screen?
Yeah. Yep.
Great. So sorry, Ian.
Very good.
Oops,
So
an extra eye here.
I'm actually not sure in this case we discussed it in the context of liaison assignments, but I think here we would be appointing Carlo as one of the co-chairs versus the select board liaison. Oh no, sorry. I'm sorry. One is just relating to all of the liaison assignments.
Right. And
versus,
so actually,
okay, my apologies.
yeah,
Okay.
There you go. So let's go with number 1 here.
Okay, very good. And the currently the ad hoc committee is scheduled to sunset in June. We'd anticipated that there would have been something to bring before April town meeting. That is not the case. Even if town meeting had taken place in April, the proposal would not have been ripe for town meeting's consideration this April. Carlo, would you like to read the motion as
The secretary,
a secretary?
please.
Yeah. Are we ready?
Is there?
I saw Mark making some changes. Have you read it? Are we good?
Sorry, I had too many. It said we adopt.
Okay.
Is that acceptable now, Ann, to you, as it is?
You didn't make any changes below the colon, did you?
No.
No.
Yeah,
I added Carlo's name, but other than that, no.
excellent. Very good.
Yeah, I'm sorry. For some reason, the screen doesn't want to render bigger. I apologize.
That's okay.
Great.
Okay. Move that the board adopt the following enabling language to reconstitute and extend the duration of the ad hoc committee on human rights. An ad hoc committee is hereby created to help establish a human rights focused organization. The following representatives shall be invited to participate as members in this ad hoc committee: 2 members of the school committee, 2 members of the select board, who shall act as co-chairs, and a member of the board of library trustees. This ad hoc committee has a sunset date of December 31st, 2020. Do I read the names?
Please.
Yes.
Board members: Ann Landry, Carlo Bacci, Sean Brandt, John Parks, and Andrew Grimes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Karen. Discussion? No? All right, we'll do the roll call. Vanessa?
Yes.
Carlo?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
And Mark, yes. 4-5-0. Okay, next is appointing VASC. Let me go back to here for a minute. Sorry, actually, let me go back to that spreadsheet that I had just a moment ago. Okay, so from our discussion last week and what was shared with Bob, Carlo, Karen, Mark have expressed interest in participating in VASC. Is everyone still interested since having in the latest things?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, so so probably we have to go through a voting process, yes?
So Mark, I don't know if this is helpful. I made a list of the primary liaison assignments on the broader list as far as assignments go.
Okay.
That may impact how the VASC plays out, if you're interested.
Sure, please. Do you have it on paper? Or?
I do. I just have it on a notebook. So I guess I'll skip me and Ann. Mark, you have Council on Aging, Public Safety, and your secondary on schools, but we agreed schools would be sort of a lighter lift. Karen has FinCom and a secondary on RMLD, so she's just got 2. Carlo has Rec, CPDC, and the ad hoc.
So, you know, the only other information we have at this point, by next week, we should have more information back from folks about if they want to be reappointed or not. And then, you know, the ones who do not want to be reappointed, clearly those are openings. We discussed how we would handle the list of folks who do want reappointment, if we would actually go through interviews or not. And that's, I think, something the VASC can talk a little bit more about. But there will be a pretty substantial list. Caitlin, what was the number we had of that we already knew before the June list? Was it 27?
The current vacancies? Yeah, I think it's about 20 something, mid 20s. And then with the vacancies ending in June, it's like 60 something, bringing the total.
Yeah,
between...
I have from Jackie from tonight, 59 incumbents were notified. So far, 37 have responded, so 22 have not. Of the 37, 28 wish to continue and 9 wish to stop. And I don't know the details of, you know, who wishes to continue or stop and which boards those are. But we hope to have those, if not at your next meeting, possibly the week after. So I think we gave a deadline of later next week.
So we'll probably have 40 to 60
Yeah,
positions.
I think so.
Okay. And then one of the things I think we want to do tonight is encourage people to participate, to sign up and see what's possible. So what are people's thoughts? We still have 3 people who remain interested in participating. I think the answer is going to be yes.
This was one of my top desired committees. I have served on a number of town committees and boards, so I would love to do it. And that was definitely knowing that this commitment would be heavy in the next couple of months, sort of directed some of my other requests and desired boards.
Got it. Carlo, was it? Oh, sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, I was just trying to recall the committees that you served on, Karen. I, of course, know since we served together that you served on FinCom, and I know I've heard of the other committees, but could you remind me what other committees you served on in town?
The Reading Historical Committee.
Okay.
Also, our most recent Tax Classification Committee.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Carlo.
Mark, I have not a suggestion, I guess a comment, where I think it would be a good opportunity for Karen and I to take this.
Whoops. You just
A
cut out.
lot of the people who want to be on boards and committees.
You're back now. Sorry, you cut out for a minute.
Can you hear
Maybe you can yes, now.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I see them. All right. Am I good? I'm sorry.
You are on. Yep.
I'm on. Okay. So I was suggesting that Karen and I, being the newest members, and then there's that male-female component, that we would be good for the positions to meet a lot of the new people who want to be on the boards and committees. I have a very flexible schedule, and I've interviewed hundreds of people over the years, as an aside.
And you remain interested in doing this, obviously.
Yes, of course, yes.
I'm willing to back away.
So Carl, just so you understand, your plate is looking pretty full. You picked some heavy hitter committees that you're going to be on.
The good news is, though, that the VASC will be meeting in the next month or two, and those committees probably will not be doing very much.
Yeah. Well, I also forgot I was on the library building committee. So that year being on town meeting and finance committee and the library building committee and serving as the liaison, that was probably the year I also was like the school committee liaison. It was nuts. I don't want to make that mistake again.
Thanks for your concern. Thank you.
So I'm okay pulling back, and why don't we just do that?
Okay.
All right. So we have a motion. Hang on. I can't get it. It won't go full screen right now. I'm not sure why. So I'll just bring it up smaller screen. Sorry.
I got it, Mark. I can see it.
Okay. I was going to fill it in.
I think I'm good.
Okay. Fire away.
All right. Move to appoint Karen Herrick and Carlo Bacci to the Volunteer Appointments Subcommittee, known as the VASC.
Second?
Any discussion? No. Okay. Let's take a vote. Vanessa.
Yes.
Carlo.
Yes.
Karen.
Yes.
Ann. Oh, you're muted. Ann, you're muted.
My apologies. Yes.
And Mark, yes. So we're 5-0. And Carla, let me just fix. And Caitlin, I'll share these with you. So, okay. So that one is approved. Back. Oops, sorry. I'm flustered because I can't get the screen to work right now. Boards and committees. Okay. Volunteers to boards and committees. So, okay, so just kind of a quick update. I guess this is kind of where we were, but I want to use it as a way to kind of encourage the public to engage and get involved with some more of these committees, wherever possible. So there is a request Caitlin sent out for volunteers, and Bob just kind of gave you the highlights that we're still waiting to hear back from 20 some odd people, but there are probably 60 openings on most of the committees that we have in town at this point. And we would love for folks to send in an application to participate in the process. If you're not familiar with town government, this is a great way to start learning about it and to see what's happening by being a member of one of these different groups. I'm going to show you the actual form that you use here. So how do you volunteer? There's a question many of you may be asking yourselves. Well, I'm going to tell you what to do here. So you can go to the town website, and down here where it says volunteer opportunities, if you click on volunteer opportunities, you'll see this page over here. And sorry, in light yellow here is volunteer application. And if you click on that, it takes you to this application form, which allows you, after providing your contact information, to specify which committees you might have some interest in. And please feel free to highlight the ones that you have the most interest in. If there's more than one that you'd have interest in, great, because if it turns out there isn't an opening on one of your choices, there may be on another one. So we encourage folks, if you've got interest in multiple groups, please let us know what they are. And then it just asks you on the bottom a little bit about kind of any relevant experience or kind of why you're applying. And that would be great and be very helpful. And if you can send those in ASAP, that would be great. We know that a lot of the VASC probably is going to be, so I guess May is pretty much the time frame we're talking about. Does that work? Because we'll have answers from folks as to whether or not they want to be reappointed. And then the appointment dates, are the appointment dates June 1st or are they June 30th?
30th.
July 1st.
July 1st.
Sorry, July 1st. Okay, yeah, so it'd be effective July 1st would be when you'd be coming in, unless you're filling in an existing opening, I guess would be the other option. So please, we would encourage folks to come join town government and kind of explore it, and it can be a lot of fun.
If I might, Mark?
Please.
I want to put in an especially loud commercial for the Finance Committee. That's a separate appointment committee. Mark saw a lengthy email from me today as chair. There are 5 openings on the Finance Committee, or there will be, I should say, on June 30th. There's 2 vacant seats right now, and there's 3 terms that will expire. So far, one of the 3 has indicated interest in continuing, but there is 5 openings. It would be especially helpful to fill the 2 vacant seats, because as I mentioned earlier, the financial situation in Reading is complex. There will be a different budget given to town meeting if we're able to meet in June, and the Finance Committee will have a great deal of work to do between, I'll say, the middle of May and the middle of June potentially. So anyone interested in the Finance Committee, now's your opportunity. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the commercial. I have had a request that I think makes a whole lot of sense. Could we just take a couple of minutes and stretch, and then we can come back? I've got kind of in 9:19. Can we take, let's say, 5 minutes and then come back? So why don't we make it 9:25 as a round number, since it's 9:19 now?
Sure.
Okay. So we are in recess for 5 minutes. I will put something more interesting on the screen. Okay, so we are back from recess. We're back to order. Next on the agenda is to have a discussion about public comment. And I have a small slide here. Let me see if I can get it to come up. I think things are working again. There we go. I thought that it would be helpful for us to just talk through how public comment is and isn't working, and if there are some ideas that folks have on how to adjust. I put together just a couple of quick comments. So, it has been an orderly discussion that we've had as part of our meetings. It's subject to the chair's discretion, actually, according to open meeting law. When we're at town hall, we were taking 10 to 15 minutes at the beginning of each meeting. People would stand, announce their name and address. The policy that had been announced was no derogatory political or items outside of the board's purview. And we had requested that people would keep their comments to about 2 minutes. So this is kind of what we had been doing in the past. We also allowed comments during board discussions after all members have spoken. Sorry. In the virtual so far, we've been using closed Zoom meetings based on security issues. We've had email participation. We have allocated some time at the beginning of the meeting and also during discussions. Again, once I think board members have spoken, with the same requested policies for comments. So that's kind of where we've been. I wanted to ask folks for their feedback and suggestions on how can we make it better. Kind of maintaining order of the meeting, but make it allow for public to comment. I guess as similarly as we had it before when we were in town hall. Any folks want to offer some suggestions or thoughts? Go ahead, Vanessa.
I mean, I think this is tough. I imagine that all towns are struggling with how to do this fairly and effectively. So I don't know what the right answer is. I mean, I will say that, there's a lot more interest now in the meetings, I think, than there have been historically because, people are home more. So I think it's a great opportunity to get people involved. The flip side of that is reading every message that comes in becomes a little unwieldy for the board because there's still board business that we need to discuss and the board members need time to discuss it. I wonder if there could be, I don't know, some kind of compromise where if people email in advance, it's automatically included in the packet. So that doesn't change. But I think for this, if we designate for public comment, perhaps, I don't know if it's for the end of the meeting or as each topic arises, and then summarizing comments that are under the purview of the board, because they'll be emailed to the board, they'll still be included in the next packet. But it's a lot easier and a lot faster to type up a message. It's a lot tougher to read it out loud. It takes more time. So I don't know how the board feels about that, creating sort of a summary of emails that come in.
Mark?
Oh.
I don't know if a summary is fair because in town hall, when someone stands up and has the courage to state their name and address, from my recollection, we don't cut them off. We let them say what they want to say, and then if we can address it and it's part of the agenda, we address it. And if it's not part of the agenda, we say thank you and we move on. I don't think there should be any summarizing of other people's words, in my opinion.
Just a quick comment. It strikes me that if there are a modest number of comments, then I think, Carlo, that's spot on. There should be no issue with that. If we get into situations where there are lots and lots of comments, then I wonder what's the best path to take then.
The other thing too that arises is that there is a difference between having an individual come to the town hall and speak on their own behalf, and then having those same words come out of the mouths of elected officials. And it is different. So I don't, like I said, I don't know what the right answer is, but I think it's also something we can continuously revisit and perhaps learn from some of our peers who are also struggling with the same issues.
I don't know how complicated this would be from a technological standpoint, but if emails came in that fell within the bounds we've set, not derogatory, not political, within the board's purview, is there a way to put them up on a slide? Or maybe that would take more time than reading them aloud to get away from the issue that Vanessa raised of them being read in the voices of the elected officials.
What if, I don't know about you, but I have colleagues in other communities. It could be something as simple as reaching out to our counterparts elsewhere and seeing what they're doing. They may have found some compromise or some arrangement that works really well.
I think that's a great idea.
I can respond, and unfortunately, the answer is not so much. People are using a similar approach as to what this board is doing. The one addition I've heard that had mixed results was to also have a phone number. But that would allow a person to directly just get into your meeting, orally, the board wouldn't have any ability to determine in advance what the person was going to say or comment on. So you'd have no real easy opportunity to decide if it fell within the bounds that you've set until the person had spoken. It's a lot harder to stop someone from speaking on a phone than it is when they're in the meeting. So that's been
Very much like real life.
yeah, that's one of the downfalls. But that was the only other twist to the email comments. The other communities are just not getting as much public input as you have in some of your meetings, quite honestly. Now, public hearings are a different issue. No one's really tackled those yet.
Right.
I think it's fair for those of us who have contacts in other communities and networks of other elected officials to check in with them as well, in case our networks aren't necessarily the same as Bob's.
Why not? Yeah, I think that makes sense. And then kind of come back and see if there are other updates. I think that the one thing about just emails is that if people don't have email, they can't contribute this way.
Right.
Not during the meeting.
That's true.
Right. They certainly can, I guess, by sending letters, by reaching out by phone. There are a number of people who contact me by phone. I think that one of the reasons why the meetings are able to progress is by kind of keeping it fairly tight. I think it's been very good to allow not just comments at the beginning of the meeting, but also comments kind of during the meeting. And I think we've been doing a pretty good job managing them so that they're not disruptive, but in fact we're able to answer questions live is actually pretty helpful. And sometimes we're even getting more input, I think, here than we did in town hall. Vanessa?
We actually got a couple of emails about public comment that raised some interesting points. So I don't know if you want to take a look at them, Mark.
Sure.
I will neither read nor summarize, since that is still an issue under consideration. So Mark, I defer to you.
The first one comes at 9:05.
As I'm reading through it for a moment. Okay, so from Linda Phillips, 42 Willow Street, making public comments conditional, blocking or censoring public comment like you just did is one of the main reasons citizens utilize the recall procedure in Massachusetts, along with failure to perform duties, failure to uphold the charter, exposing the town to legal action. In that light, please explain your comment rule. Comments cannot be political. What is the agreed upon definition of political comment that might restrict public free speech outside of profane language? The comment regarding criteria not in the purview of the select board. Sometimes it's not clear to the originator what actually is or is not in the select board purview. The message should still be read and then recommended and forwarded to the appropriate responsible party. 2 suggestions. 1, all comments sent in should be read in full unless profane. 2, please project emails on screen via screen share. Thank you, Linda Phillips. One comment in terms of open meeting law. So I did just a little bit of homework to see kind of what's done. And although open meeting law always encourages public comment, it actually is not required. It's actually at the discretion of the chair in terms of allowing it and also establishing some boundaries around it. And often the boundaries involve being disruptive to the meeting. Excuse me, not often. The boundaries are things that could be deemed disruptive to the meeting, and it gives the chair the ability to define what that is. And it actually prescribes a process for if things are disruptive, how to indicate they're disruptive. And then if the behavior continues, obviously this is meant for in person, the ability to call in a constable or someone else to ask the person to leave the meeting. So those are the open meeting law rules that I'm familiar with specific to that. So as it relates to public comments that are kind of within those bounds and allowing it to take place, I think that's what's been used in the past, certainly the last several years, and that's what I suggested here as well. So that's kind of the background as to what those things are. Carrie Perry, 307 West Street. Dear Select Board, I have a general question. From the sounds of it, there will be likely many openings on boards and committees. Is there a rule on how many committees and boards one person can be on at one time in case people have interest in more than one? The one restriction that I'm familiar with is that if you are on the Finance Committee, you cannot be on anything else. I don't think there's a restriction on others. But Bob, do you know, am I correct on that? Yep. Oh, so you're muted. Yep. So the Finance Committee is the if you're on Finance Committee, that's the only board and committee that you can be on in terms of public. Obviously, privately you can do whatever you choose, but publicly that's the only one.
Mark?
Yes.
Could I have a comment before we read the next letter? As long as the emails that are coming in are relatively short, I was pretty comfortable with the way we were doing this, assuming everyone is okay with an elected official reading the letter. I would say that we had one or two very long letters last time that became unwieldy and probably went past 2 minutes. So
Right.
I wasn't really tracking the length of Ms. Phillips' letter, but that seems to be like probably about as much as we could handle in 1 or 2 minutes. And most of them tend to be briefer and they're easier to read aloud. And
Yeah, so maybe that notion of a couple of minutes, and maybe it corresponds usually to a couple of paragraphs. The goal is to, as you said, not have things be unwieldy and to allow other people who have comments to share their comments.
We could ask for a word limit, as paragraphs could be as long as paragraphs will be.
Yeah, and to be clear, as it relates to sending a message to the board that's going to get published in the packet, there is no limit. I think what we're talking about is from a practical point of view and how to kind of keep this meeting moving, what can we accommodate? So that's, we've used kind of the 2-minute idea has been used in town hall. And so I was thinking that would, similarly, that would work here.
Mark, I have an idea. I don't know how the board feels about this, but we tend to get 2 different types of communication. One is questions, which is residents asking us about process, about procedure, about status of things. And the other is a public statement. So one thing we could do is ask the questions that where people are requesting information, and those could be read aloud, assuming a certain amount of brevity, and longer comments could just be included in the packet. I mean, they're all included in the packet either way. But this way, for those that are requesting information, it's now available to the public. I don't know, that could be an option.
Any other thoughts?
I don't disagree with that idea, but I think a lot of the reason people are making public comment is they want a question answered, like Vanessa said, a specific question, or, and we're not, as far as, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, we're not, or you're not required, or the board's not required to answer, to comment on the questions, correct?
Right. I think by practice, we've done pretty much what you outlined. And if it's inside the purview and it's on the agenda, if we can answer it, we try to answer it then and there. And if it's not on the agenda or we can't answer it, we refer it kind of to the next thing, to the next discussion.
So I think as we've been talking this through, and I think there's some good ideas about length but I just don't want to get into censoring public comment or, not disallowing people to say what they want to say. And yes, it can't be a diatribe of three pages, but maybe we should just make up some guidelines sooner than later on, like what Ann suggested. Let's keep it brief. Let's keep it to the agenda as much as possible. Let's have maybe not a word limit exactly, but a suggested guideline. Just like you said in town hall, they stand up, state their name. It's pretty brief, typically. There have been some long-winded ones because of the matter at hand, but for the most part, it's pretty direct and pretty straightforward. So now we're in Zoom form, it's a little bit different. And I agree, reading someone else's email, I'm not volunteering, Caitlin, but would people if people are uncomfortable with, is Caitlin an option? I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not trying to not do anything, but I know the first couple of weeks we took turns when there was a lot, and today seemed to be pretty light. So it is going to vary from week to week. So
they're still coming in.
now they're coming in because we're talking about public comment, right? Which is good. Which is good in a way.
Mm-hmm. I had some suggestions for the parameters, and certainly recognizing that Mark has a lot of discretion as chair in terms of preventing things from being disruptive, but to provide, I think, a little bit of clarity about, going to Linda Phillips' question about what does that mean, cannot be political. What that could mean is, campaign related. And then to the extent, Mark, you mentioned in the parameters, should not be derogatory. We could also specify that comments should not engage in any personal attacks or engage in personalities. I think those aren't contradictory, but it kind of, I think, might provide some additional clarity for when things are not in order.
Thank you. Yep, I think that's a good suggestion. Other comments from the board?
If I could add that, I think if you really want to be simple, there's two types of topics the board discusses. One is a discussion and one is a vote. I think you have to be very sensitive to censoring any comments pertaining to a vote. I might write in a comment as a resident, and I want all the members to make sure they heard it before you vote, as well as the rest of the community that might stimulate other comments. Whereas if you're having a discussion, my comment is not nearly as necessary or important at that moment. And voting is not always in public hearings. Obviously, that's kind of the extreme. But I think the board just has to be a little cautious about, setting up rules that would be difficult to administer in terms of silencing people when you're going to vote on something and make some decision. If you were dealing with them in person, you'd let them speak. If it's not on topic, then all bets are off. You generally would only
in person. Even if we were in person, the chair would have the ability to, if someone was saying something to attack someone or, making some kind of campaign statement, the chair would have the discretion to bang the gavel and roll them out of order in such a scenario.
That's appropriate.
Mark, one of the things that I've seen as well is that when there are, to Bob's point, topics that are going to be voted on, the chairs have generally, myself included, have allowed public comment at the beginning of that topic. And then after that, public comment is closed and it is strictly a board discussion. So one of the things that does is it allows the board to hear resident concerns and then allows the board to engage in a discussion with just the 5 members and any staff or legal counsel, so that there's an open portion and then there's a deliberation portion. And that also helps streamline it, because one of the things I've observed just in the past, say, a month, is that it's challenging for us to go back and forth as we're reading these comments.
Yeah.
And then we're having a discussion. And so people are participating sort of in real time, when the board really needs to be deliberating on how we're going to move forward. And then we sometimes get a little sidetracked depending on what the question is. So that's something else another way we can address it, which is if you have comments, we can address them. Now, whether we summarize or whether we abbreviate, I personally am not comfortable reading comments submitted by the public. They're not my words. And I would feel very awkward reading them, regardless of the topic. I think there's something to be said for including them in the packet, or if people have questions, to ask them as is. And I don't think that's something that we should expect the staff to do either.
So just thinking out loud for a second, one of the things that I've noticed that changed from town hall versus online. Town hall, I think we listened to questions, we listened to comments, whether it was vote related or not. We didn't really respond to them. Now, what we've been attempting to do is to be very responsive in real time, kind of adding a new burden to where it was before. And maybe that's, if we were to take, let's say, public comment in the beginning as more of a discussion and input and a listening activity, I think that's an orderly way to do it. I think that it would be fine. And maybe we're being too responsive. I don't know that. I don't know what that. I don't mean to say it that way, but in terms of the process of the meeting, we're attempting to answer questions in real time. And I don't think we were doing that before.
We were not, and I haven't seen that done on my time at the board or in my time watching board meetings either. I mean, perhaps if it's COVID-19 related, I think that's a very unique subject where the public could have questions, and I think that's an area where being overly responsive would be a great thing. I think for standard town business, it might behoove us to, we're virtual, but handle it in a way that's similar to if we were all in the same room.
I think it's an interesting thought. Let me, if I could, read from Jonathan Barnes, because I think this kind of touches on this also. Jonathan Barnes on Pratt Street. Under your current procedure for public comment via Zoom, you're providing for Select Board response to public comments that are submitted during your meeting. However, you are not similarly providing any responses for public comment submitted in advance of your meeting. You're merely including those in your packets. Can you explain this discrepancy, please? Thank you. So I think it's a well taken point. It gets, so items that we receive before the packet is posted. All those items go into the packet, and I guess conceivably are part of our agenda. But we tend to address the very specific ones, specific concerns, safety, other things like that, and some of the others perhaps not as well. And maybe that's something we want to take a look at in terms of we're taking a look at what was in there and having some information. In fact, maybe that's more important in some sense than the ones that are coming in live, because those, we have those in advance and can, in many cases, do homework and get answers for them.
The interesting thing about ones that come in advance is that, Bob is CC'd on all of them because they've come to the entire board. And so by the time we hit a meeting, 9 times out of 10, either Bob or another staff member has already addressed their question. So one of the reasons I think we don't generally address them in meetings live is because they've already been handled.
Yeah.
Bob, would you agree with that?
Well, that circles back to the much discussed select board communication policy. I'll do whatever you want. I just need to kind of understand what there is. But certainly as a practical matter, I often get emails that you get, not necessarily, it's just sent to me as town manager. Obviously, those I respond to. Ones sent to the board, I'm reluctant to respond to because it wasn't asked of me. I might send to, for instance, there was an email sent during the meeting that I responded with the answer to Mark as the chair. He said, this was sent to the board, here's the answer. If Carlo as secretary has some information, I might pass along to him. But I'll do whatever the board wants me to do as long as it's clear. If it's an urgent matter of any sort, then I'm not going to care so much what your policy is. I'm going to answer the question if someone really needs an answer, and we have it, absolutely. Quite often, some of the questions are complex, and I won't have an answer before your meeting. I'll have referred it out to staff members who could take a couple days to get an answer. So by, after your meeting, it may be followed up. But again, I'm just waiting for direction from you, or I'll just sort of outline what I think we should do, and we'll go with that if you prefer, whatever you like. But an email to the board is different than an email to me or staff, in my opinion.
Well, on this question, should Bob and I go back to, there was a draft that Bob and I had worked on together on this policy that we brought to the board for comment, received a number of comments from the board. We can kind of go back to that, revisit it, and bring it back to the board at a future meeting.
Yeah, I think so. I think these are helpful points.
So Mark?
Yes.
Should we go out to our colleagues and see if they have come up with something else?
Absolutely. Let's see what best practices are. Let's see what's working for other folks, and how they manage it. I think that's a great idea. So, does each of us want to reach out somehow to some colleagues? And then come back in ideally in a week's time, but if that's too tight, let's say 2 weeks, with comments on how are the other people doing it, what do they think is working, and if they could design it in a different way, what would they do? I always love that question.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, let me share that. So Bob, you had there was a question from Meredith Reed, 31 Van Norden Road. Hi, can someone remind viewers how to connect with the food pantry number or website? And here's the information. So Reading Food Pantry, 6 Salem Street, Reading. Phone number is 781-944-2636.
Yeah, of course, that's at Old South United Methodist Church, and we've been talking about how they're no longer, the deliveries are happening, people are driving up and the food's brought out to their cars. People can donate there is a way people can donate online by way of PayPal or I think credit card, and people can donate at the end of their shopping trips at Market Basket, and I think also Stop and Shop.
Great. Do you know, is there a website that is used at PayPal?
There's a Facebook page. I don't know if there's a website.
Let me see.
People can also donate, as many of them have, at the police station, town hall, or superintendent's office. There's a mailbox. At town hall, it's just as you would walk in the door next to the parking lot. And it's got a little red flag that's either up or down. People are donating a lot of things to the food pantry just at town hall because it's convenient and it's secure. So that's another option.
Thank you. Next on the list, Angela Binda, 10 Orchard Park Drive. Hi, Mark and all the board. I appreciate the opportunity for public comment. However, public comment was always a comment time, not a Q&A. I don't like the tone of some of the questions, and I do not think the select board needs to respond to every question. Public comments can be read, but the board does not need to have, the board does not need to answer questions. And then there is another one that doesn't have an address. Mike.
I think there's an address at the bottom.
Sorry, I can't. Oh, there it is. Sorry. Thank you. Oh, for Mike Monahan, Bancroft Ave. Thank you. Sorry, I had my screen too high. Regarding SB Chair's comments regarding his ability to limit public comments under the open meeting law, Middlesex Superior Court has ruled the Natick School Committee's policy governing the public speaking portion of its meetings violates the free speech provisions of the Massachusetts Constitution. According to the ruling, the policy affords the school committee too much discretion to silence unwanted criticism, and Todd says a website, www.toddweld.com/court/rules-natick-school-committee-speech-policy-unconstitutional. Thank you for the comment. Any board comments about public comment? Okay, let's come back to this. I think it's an evolving and continuing process. I think each of us has agreed to reach out to some other groups and see what we can find for best practices. If we can, try not to all contact the same people, I guess, in North Reading and Stoneham, if we can help it, try to get a little bit more diversity of opinion, but let's see what we can bring back to it. Next on the agenda is communications. So in the packet, there were two pieces, one the Facebook piece and the other policy piece. Vanessa and Ann, how do you want to proceed on that? Do you want to talk the Facebook policy first? That was first in there?
My part's pretty quick, so we can crank that out, Ann, if you're okay with that.
Yes, of course.
So I attached the draft social media policy. I realized there's a few pieces from the MMA annual conference, the Massachusetts Municipal Association, some recommendations that they had made. So I think whatever the final version is, that should be included, and we can discuss that further. But at our last meeting, we had talked about the board wanting to review this to see if there were certain things that they might want to change or address or had concerns about before it went to legal counsel for review. And that's where we are. So I'm sure everyone read every page, every one of the 10 pages word for word. So I think if there's comments at this point, we could, if you have track changes or comments, that maybe we could send them to you, Bob. And then the board could review them at a future meeting, and then we can send it to town council. It's a little bit of a clunky way of reviewing a document, but.
So what if we, I think, take your suggestion and have each person mark up the draft and look at the options, and if there are preferences, either I like this or I don't like this, maybe that would be great for each board member to indicate that. And why don't we put it onto our next agenda, or next one of two?
If that's the case, then I would suggest everyone send it no later than the end of the day Sunday, so that Bob can include it in our packet for Monday. and I'll include the additions that I have as well.
Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Mark, can I ask you a question
Sure.
that you can ask the board? Are we talking about right now, because I did read through most of it, are we talking about right now that the fact that we even want a Facebook page, or is that step one? Do all 5 of us, 2 of us, 3 of us, 4 of us, like what order are we going in?
Good question. Does the policy address this topic? In other words, does it include that we would have a Facebook page, or is that, to Carlo's point, it's something we really should be talking about first?
So I raised this last week as step 1, which is, do we as a board want a Facebook page? Because if the answer is no, then everything else is relevant. So yes, Carlo, I think you're spot on. I think we need to first identify, is this something the board wants to pursue? And if yes, then is it something we want to pursue right now?
Yep.
Yeah, those are questions 1 and 2, and then the policy follows.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we need to at least discuss it, or, you've done a lot of work, Vanessa, but, my mindset is that, and the easy answer is that we don't need one. Wanting one and needing one is different. And the fact that we have to use legal counsel when they should be doing other things is another red flag. We need to be conserving right now and not spending our money. But that's just my opinion. All of us, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, all 4 of us have Facebook pages and select board pages that we could utilize, and I'll leave it at that.
So I think this is a great discussion, and maybe what we need to do first, and you guys may have done it, so correct me if I'm just behind the times, is kind of what is it that we don't feel is happening or is happening inappropriately that we want to address. So I know one of the things that came up quite specifically was we received some public feedback saying, why can't the board speak with one voice?
Mm-hmm.
Person A sends this over their network, person B sends something not exactly the same, slightly different over their network. And the comments that came into us were, why can't you speak with one voice? So to me, I thought that was the impetus for saying, okay, what's the way to speak with one voice? What options do we have if we want to do that? But so that was my thought. Karen.
Yeah, I thought about that public comment. So we did only get one feedback concerning that. And the way Facebook works is if you're all in the same circles and there's important information that gets shared to different places and you're all in those same places, you're going to get multiple notifications. I don't know if that person also gets notifications on their phone, in which case they can turn those off, because that would be the smart thing to do. But my concern is that we have some really good stuff going up on the Town of Reading Facebook page. And because it isn't that seasoned, it hasn't been around that long, and I think people were missing some of the good stuff. And I think that feedback was my impression. I don't know what anyone else thought. I thought that select board members were sharing important pieces of information, and often it was coming from the Town of Reading Facebook page. So it was just creating more awareness. And as more people utilize that page, then the question is, do we need to have a select book Facebook page? Because I haven't read through all of this, so I don't know if we're going to be creating unique content. I know some previous select board members are actually reaching out to their communities with content. So
just a quick question. Is the issue having consistent content, or is it having kind of the location to put the content, or both? It sounds like, Karen, what you were saying is it's having consistent content and a place where people would know to look for it.
I mean, on that particular instance, Anne shared something important. We're all on the same networks. Carlo shared something important. I shared something important, and Anne shared something important. It might have been the same. It was all in different spots, and none of it was personal. It was all hey, this bulletin was out there. We want to make sure everyone out there sees it. So I'm not sure that I interpret that as why doesn't the board speak with one voice? It was different members of the board doing their job, making sure that the public knows what they need to know. So that was my take on that feedback. But we only got one.
I mean, this came up a couple of years ago, and we've sort of been playing around with it since. You know, the reality is that a lot more people are on social media than other forms of communication. Not everyone gets the paper. Not everyone gets announcements from the local online press. And so this was one way for the board to have outbound communication efforts. And as far as what the content would be, aside from the town website, which a lot of people have a hard time navigating, the idea was to post when our meetings are, to post announcements, especially for things like when we're searching for recruiting volunteers for boards, committees, and commissions, to post the links to our meetings once they're on RCTV, to post the packets as a reference point. So it's a bit of a one-stop shop for anything related to the select board. How the board chooses to expand that in the future is to be determined. But that was the initial thought behind having a dedicated page. And there is something to be said for having a single voice.
So I think originally when Vanessa and I met close to a year ago about this, my concern was that it created perhaps more problems, with, having to manage public comments, et cetera, and determining who decides what content is posted, et cetera. I think the reason we revisited it was because of that comment we received from a member of the public about the board speaking with one voice during these pandemic times. It does seem like it is not quite so simple as, okay, well, let's just publish it with COVID-19 related content and we can go off and do that immediately. There still are those related issues that have to be worked out. I don't have a problem with individual members of the board posting information related to the town, to their network, because I think that's part of our responsibility is to get the word out about stuff that we're working on to our networks. And they're certainly overlapping, but I don't think it's necessarily duplicative when we do that.
No, because we all have different friend networks.
Right. Overlapping, no doubt, but not duplicative. Exactly.
Mark, oops, I lost you guys.
Please, sorry.
Something happened to my screen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. I can't see anybody, but if you can hear me, that's fine. I just did some numbers on the more popular pages of our registered voters, which is about 20,000-ish. The Reading Parents Network covers about 30% of that population. The Reading Rant, about 20%. The Town of Reading website, about 14%. And the newly formed Reading coronavirus at about 9%. So as Karen mentioned, we do stuff and am more than I think me on especially the COVID, the Reading Facebook coronavirus Facebook page. But I am sharing. I'm not commenting, by the way. I'm sharing Town of Reading, RPD, RFD, obviously the recent fire at Meadowbrook, anything positive, sharing anything with information that, yes, not everyone goes to the website, but Reading Parents Network being over 6,000 members, that's a lot of eyes. And that's where I post some stuff. And there is some overlapping there of all those groups. But I think that's a valuable tool.
So maybe what we need to ask ourselves is two questions. One is there a problem in that we're either not getting out to the group that could be reached through social media, or is there a problem with those messages? And the other is there an opportunity that we're missing? Right? If we can answer those two questions, we'd have a pretty good handle on where to go.
So one thing I actually have heard from two residents separately in recent weeks is that they have trouble locating the packet. So I'm wondering, is that something that was something that Vanessa and I were contemplating as being part of a routine Reading Select Board page? Could that become a routine part of the Town of Reading Facebook page? Or is that something we could talk to Jane about, as just make that routine?
Oh yeah, that's easy.
Mark?
Sorry, go ahead. Yes.
I could be mistaken, but I don't know if Bob knows, or I don't know who does our IT stuff on the Facebook, but as far as I know, the Town of Reading has joined the Reading Parents Network.
I would say Reading staff have joined, yes, to
Okay.
observe, not to comment.
No, not to comment, but to post.
No, not to post.
Okay.
I do think
But
I've
to
seen the Town
keep
of
their
Reading.
eyes and ears
Yeah.
open and bring information back to us that's important. And then they may post on the Reading pages. You know, if there's an issue that's been brought up on another page, they may post on the Reading issues. But we didn't want to get into debates on other social media sites.
No, not debates. I could be misspoken, but I think Michelle said that the Town of Reading can post on the Reading Parents Network.
It's possible we can post, but I would seriously doubt that we are.
Okay.
I thought I saw one, and all it was a share from the Town of Reading website, Town of Reading Facebook page. So again, the way to remind people where the information is to in the beginning post, and everyone
Yeah.
can see that it came from the Town of Reading. So certainly there was nothing inappropriate, in my opinion. And
Well, certainly anyone, a member of the group, can share from our pages.
yep.
Yep. It sounds like a page can join a group. Just to share another comment that came in specific to Facebook. This is from David Panett, 22 Colonial Drive. I'd like to know why the Select Board is moving towards utilizing Facebook for communications. I do not do Facebook. I don't believe I'll be moving towards it at any time in the near future. Communications now take place through the internet, and those communications are available to anyone with internet access. Why is there a need for another layer of communication? Is it really necessary? Facebook needs to be managed by someone. Who will administrate the page? Who decides who can and cannot join this page? I just do not see the need for a redundancy for open communications, especially a method of communication where a Reading citizen could be denied access to, whether that denial is intentional or not. So I think certainly whatever we'd be talking about here would not be instead of other things. It would be in addition.
Right.
So, okay, so I think we get to take a little step back here. Would it be possible for the board to either post to the town Facebook page or ask that things be posted to it?
That's easy. If you ever have things you want us to share, I would imagine we're happy to share. You know, I'm going to kick it down the road to a time when it's not as soon as we'd like, but this is a good topic for your retreat. And I don't mean to delay you for several months, because I thought we'd be having one sooner. This is a pretty in-depth discussion, I would say. It touches a lot of areas. If there's any improvement in communication, we're all for it. You share our stuff, you make suggestions, you want more comments or more information in different locations, by all means, we'll do that. You know, with the stats that Carlo just read off, you know, we need more eyes on the information, or at least the eyes have to be aware where it is. So whether you all share it individually, share it to the popular pages, makes no difference to us. It's just get the information out there and have people understand where to find it. If finding Select Board's package is a challenge, and I understand it's a bit of a challenge, we'll just do it a different way. It's not hard.
What I told residents that my go-to is So and I think there's more than one way to navigate to the packet, but what I do routinely, if I'm on the readingma.gov website, I will go to the town's calendar, click on the date of our meeting. You can go to the meeting link and the packet is there.
That's absolutely the best way.
Yep.
Do that too.
Would it be, there's an archives that's available that's, I know, that is not kept current, but that is an easier way to access all of the packets at once as opposed to opening up each meeting one at a time. Would it be possible to update the archives so that those reflect the packets? Because I know that people
It's funny, I don't know the details recently, but I did ask the town clerk over the weekend to please add 2020, the decade, 2020 to 29. She just had forgot to do that in December, so we couldn't have updated this year. But typically, that's not as updated as the calendar certainly would be. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do a better job.
I second that. And now we've been switching back and forth from Tuesday to Wednesday, so no one's ever going to be able to find that.
Right.
But for I guess the foreseeable future, I think we're set for Wednesdays, 7 o'clock, certainly in the COVID-19 world. And then we'll see after that where it heads, but people can be counting on that for a bit.
I have a motion for a Mark Doxer Facebook page.
So there are some areas I feel stronger in and others not so. This might be one of them that's not so. I have a suggestion here. This feels like there's some big philosophical issues going on. And certainly specific to Facebook, that's true, but even at the policy level, there was a lot of push initially to say, hey, let's have a policy. Let's be clear who can say what and what are the rules. Without rules, how do people know what to do? So I think that was the push for the policy. It feels like we need to all sit with this a little bit, read it, and offer some feedback. And I know our intent was to kind of think about it philosophically last week, but we're all probably pretty busy. Maybe 1 week is way too tight of a time frame for doing it. Maybe we should give ourselves literally 2 weeks, something like that, if that works for everybody, and be specific and just say, here's what we'd like to have come back. And, one is, what do you think are the communications issues and challenges that we face? 2 is, do you have suggestions on how to address them? And 3 would be looking specifically at the policy. What about it do you think is right, needs to be addressed? What about it concerns you? And then any other comments. And then if we can gather that information together, I'm sorry, I know it's a restart of some sorts, but it's not. It's taking the stuff that you've done that's great and saying, okay, how do we make this congeal so that everybody is seeing what we want to do, agrees on it, and we'll take it forward.
Mark, could I ask if those questions could be typed up and emailed to us?
Sure. I may have to review the tape, but yes.
Thank you.
Have we settled the threshold question as to whether we are going to have a Facebook policy over which to establish a policy?
Yeah, I think that would save a lot of time, Ann. Yeah, I think I agree with that.
So,
There are other certainly broader communications issues beyond, do we have a Facebook page?
Right.
So actually, it would be helpful if you could remind us what the questions.
Mouth went much faster than other people on this. Sorry. I can come back to see what they were, but I think that it really was philosophically understanding what are the communications challenges that we're trying to address.
Okay.
And see if we can get to some agreement on what they are. And that's both problems and opportunities. What are the things that aren't going right, and where are areas that we could do better reach? And I'm not talking specific to Facebook or anything else. It's generic or general, not generic, general about communications. So that was kind of 1. 2 was then to look specifically at the social media policy and see how that relates to the answering the first question. and responding to it, looking at it and saying, hey, is this what we need to do? Are there things in here I agree with? Are there things in here I don't agree with? And then come back and have a discussion about it. And it may be that it's a retreat item, or I know this has been dancing around for a very long time. Certainly north of a year, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's a big challenge, but I think these are the right questions, right? I just think we need to understand, what are we trying to do first, and then we can talk about how we're going to do it. Go ahead, Colin.
If I might, especially for the two newest members who haven't had the pleasure of going through the select board policies in a hearing format, a lot of this is covered or is attempted to be covered in some of your policies, which are online under the select board page. So I'd suggest, especially the new members, just take a quick look.
Yeah, I think all five of us. I certainly can.
So what we should be going over is this Town of Reading social media policy draft that Vanessa's put together.
So I think we should, given the discussion tonight, it seems like we should set aside the policy itself until, I think, if we answer Mark's 3 questions on communication philosophy and whatever the third one was, Mark, then that'll put us in a better place on whether or not we want to move forward with the social media page. So that was question 1 on next steps. Is this what we want to do? I feel like we need to answer that before we get to the policy itself.
Right.
And I think the highest level question, if I could, is not specific to Facebook or anything else. It's what in communications, what are our feelings about kind of inbound and outbound communications philosophically, and what are the goals that we think we should have? And then we can talk about what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And I can appreciate different people communicate different ways. One of the biggest challenges I've had as a member of the finance committee, as well as on this board, is how do you reach out to more people? So there are certainly groups that are on social media. There are some groups that are going to be on the website. There are some groups that aren't on the internet at all. There are some people who get the newspaper. We're when we reach all of them, we're still not reaching a big enough group.
Now, one communications issue that we're setting aside and that I'm going to work on with Bob is the inbound emails received and how to respond to them. So correct that
Yes.
Bob and I are taking on. That's not part of the philosophical discussion. This is, we're taking pen to paper and hammering this out.
So that's a definite piece of the inbound. And that's the follow-through discussion that I think we've had. Again, our hope had been that we, in the non-COVID world, we'd have a retreat, we'd be talking about our priorities, and kind of everything would be marching along. So we've had to readjust a little bit. So long as it kind of can fit into our priorities, I think we need to get to that. We need to be making sure that we're working on the things that we need to work on. I think communications is a big issue in terms of the outbound. Again, it's outreach. How do we do it better? And I take the point of, do we need X? Do we need Y? We need to figure out what we want. And then I think we can say, okay, if you do this, here's what happens. If you do that, here's what happens. And see if those make sense.
Does everyone think that having the packet post, our select board packet posted on the Town of Reading Facebook page is a good idea? And should we ask staff if they're willing to do that?
Yeah. Can't hurt.
I don't see any problem with it. I think the calendar, finding it on the calendar is not, when you go to the website, I'm used to digging around for archives, which Vanessa mentioned need to be updated. So I don't think that is an intuitive place that people would look. I mean, it could be described better on the website. So I mean, if we start doing the select board, then why not do like all packets, like all meetings? But I mean, no one else objects. I don't see a problem with it.
Yeah.
If we were to put the packet up on the town's Facebook page, I'm not too Facebook savvy. How easy is it to search for it? Weeks later.
Oh, later.
You'd have to scroll, I think.
Okay.
You might be able to do some word search, but I'm not entirely sure how effective that would be.
As I think, the current packet is one thing, but if someone's trying to find historical information, that's quite
I
different.
mean, they should really go digging in an archive.
It can't be the new repository, but it could be just one additional.
Yeah, I think.
Could I
from what
recommend-
gather, most people are searching for current information. I'm sure there's other uses, and they're
Right.
using the calendar function because it's right there.
Right.
And then the historic things that Vanessa and others have mentioned, we need to do a better job of that. I don't know how often those are used. Be interesting.
Pretty often, given the number of people that ask me about them.
Okay, that's good.
But I think, can I suggest that before we start posting select board packets on the Town of Reading Facebook page, that we determine if in fact that's what we really want to do, because what I want to avoid is inconsistently posting things on different pages. So why don't we choose a plan of attack before we start making any changes?
So I think we end up coming back to the questions. But before we come back to the questions, Carlo, I think you had a comment. I'm sorry, you didn't get it.
I think a few minutes back, I mean, I could be mistaken. I think when Ann was making one of her comments, are we trying to, the select board Facebook page, are we looking to lighten the load and decide tonight, the five of us, if that's going to be part of our discussion? Or like you said, Mark, philosophically, some of us seem to think we don't need it. So then why continue the conversation, I guess, or just want to lump it all together.
Yeah.
I think Ann was trying to infer, but I'm not sure.
And I would ask you to respond.
I wasn't sure, based on the three questions you mentioned earlier, that I didn't quite absorb, Mark, when you were asking, because I wasn't sure if you were asking us to fully review the social media policy and provide lots of feedback on that, which I do think if we're going to do that, do we want to have a Facebook page is a good threshold question.
So I was actually suggesting, I was suggesting we go up higher than this.
Yes.
Above the issue of social media policy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's an issue of better communication.
Right.
What are the issues that we're having? And then we can talk about what do we think are remedies or opportunities to fix them. And it could be that social media is a part of that, and it could be that Facebook is a part of the social media. I was thinking, let's not. That seems too specific. I don't think we need to answer the question. I don't think we need to do anything else on that question at all until we've talked about what are the issues we're trying to address in communications, and make sure we're on track, that we're in agreement. This is what we're trying to do. Here's what's missing. Here's what isn't working. Great. And then we can take it forward. But not until we've answered those first questions.
Let me just go back in history again for some of the newer members. I don't know, 2 years ago, roughly, maybe 18 months ago, we had a plan where the subcommittee, the communication subcommittee, I can't remember if it was the same two members, we're going to meet with Matt and Jane as staff, and then Matt and Jane were going to come in and discuss things with the whole board. And that's really what Mark is now asking, to improve communications. I think we owe it to you to, use our existing resources better first. And then you'll have a much better idea of what's still the gap, what's still the shortfall. So if the board wants to have that discussion, it's a little harder to do it now remotely, but we're all ready to do that. We need to hear suggestions from you about what's deficient and what needs to be improved.
I think that sounds reasonable, and it also is getting to be 10:30. So I think those two things working together. When we get a takeaway item, kind of an action item to go forward from here, and I would suggest that it's come back, and maybe 2 weeks makes more sense, so we can either give it some thought or else make sure all of our priorities fit. But come back and think about communications, and think about what are our goals for communication, for improving communication. What's not working? What could work better? And to Bob's point, it may be that we can utilize some existing resources. That would be great. And it may be that we find there are some other things that, could be tweaked and could happen. Then I think we can get down deeper into specific issues. Do we want this? Do we want that? I do think, however, and ask your opinion. I do remember some discussion about, we do need a social media policy. What should members say? Or should they be a designated person who says things? Or is it fine for everybody to say, whatever they want? Obviously you obviously can't speak for the whole board. None of us can ever, but, for yourself. I think there was an attempt, and you guys hopefully are going to nod your heads in this policy to make it clear what the expectations are, and then have everybody agree to those. So I think that needs to be read through also, and just see what's in there. And again, let's not get hung up on, is it Facebook or another media? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? What are the guidelines that we think make sense? And then we can come back to this and say, okay, let's work on, X. We can ask the board, we can ask the town staff to do certain things also, which would be great. Because one of the things that comes through, Vanessa, very clearly from your policy, from your proposals, clearly is somebody needs to own responsibility for it. Somebody or somebodies. So, to the extent that, we can work more clearly, with staff, that maybe that's a bonus to get us started.
So Mark, one thing I do want to raise, because it sounds like this is wrapping up, the board does not have a social media policy the way the school committee does, for example. So the school committee has a policy that indicates you do not post on social media on school committee matters. And numerous people from the school committee have indicated a desire to perhaps revisit that policy. So if this board's, so if you're asking about whether we should have a policy indicating what we as individual board members can and cannot say in social media, I would not be super excited about that.
What is in the draft policy here now? Because it's town officials, it's posting by elected or appointed members.
So that policy is very specific to if we have a select board social media page.
Thank you. I didn't get that. Now I do. Sorry. Okay. Ignore my comments about that policy.
That's my suggestion of the threshold question.
Okay. So like Don's on Marblehead. Okay. So would the board be comfortable kind of taking those kind of philosophical communication goals as the first step here? And then we can come back and talk about, okay, how do we turn that into practice? How do we get it done? And then we can decide where do we need to have rules versus not. Simpler? Okay. I will publish the questions. Make them quick and easy.
Good luck.
Go ahead, Carla.
I said good luck.
I'll try. You guys will give me feedback, I'm certain. Why don't we move on to the last topic of the night, which is future agenda. So a couple of things for next week. I mentioned early on that the state legislators, all three of them, are willing to spend some time with us. I think that would be great. I think it'd be great to ask the public and ourselves for questions in advance to give them some guidance on what they should be prepared to talk through. So if that is one item. Bob, you mentioned that we want to have a much more substantial update from command, and that there are some issues, some opportunities and issues that'll change. It'd be a great chance for command to offer an update that might be a bit more lengthy.
And that can be any of the next couple of meetings. It doesn't have to be next week. You can think about whether that's appropriate with the elected officials or not. Tonight you had about a half an hour, I think, on COVID-19. I think you probably need about an hour if the whole command team came in. There's just a wide array of things that it would be beneficial, I think, for you to get an update on. It doesn't have to be next week, but the postponing of school for the rest of the year seemed to be an impetus of, okay, we're in a different phase now.
Yeah, so it sounds like actually sooner might be better than later.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mark,
Yes, sorry, Colin.
was elected officials next week or in 2 weeks? I'm sorry.
So they offered for next week,
Next
for the
week.
20, is that the 29th?
29th, yep.
29th, yes. And we could either have them, we could do the update and their participation separately. So in other words, that, you know, there's a time when they'll be participating, and then we'll do our update separately from that. I was looking to see what else is really on the agenda for the 29th right now.
Mark,
It's been a,
I would suggest that we list both the RMLD payment to the town of Reading as well as the RMLD 20-year agreement. We don't necessarily have to get to both of those next week, but if we could put them on the next 2 agendas, that'll give us some wiggle room depending on when we hear from them on the updated proposal.
just throwing this out there, would it make sense to ask for one of the members of the commissioners or Colleen to join us for one or both of those topics?
Can certainly ask, yeah.
Or we'd have
If the board would like to invite them, sure.
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 okay, when we ask what their preference would be. And
All right, I'll reach out to the chair. Does that work, Mark, or would you prefer to?
No, please.
Okay, great. I'll let you know.
Okay, so that's RMLD, great. Any other items that we have mentioned but have not closed on here?
I think you wanted to finish off liaison assignments.
Yes, indeed. Anything else?
I believe that next week's update from Bob will include MassDOT.
Something specific in terms of
Bigger world, sorry, bigger world and that stuff. Yeah.
If anything happens, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think that'll take more than a few minutes.
Okay, great. If anything else comes up in the next day or so, why don't you send a note to me and to Bob, and we'll accommodate. Cool.
Okay.
So first of all, thanks everybody. This is great. I'm sorry we ran so long. Goal was to stand it before 10 o'clock. Failed tonight. Sorry. Trying to fix that for the future. Any other business anybody has? Carlo, might you have a motion?
Motion to adjourn the meeting on April 22nd.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we'll do the roll call. Ann,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Carlo,
Yes.
Vanessa,
Yes.
Mark, yes, 5-0. We are adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Great.
Night.
Bob. Thank you.